Welcome to Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup. I'm your host, Jason Bland, and tonight's guest is Linda Godfrey. If you're not familiar with her, well, she's written 18 books, a lot of them to do with the Dogman or the Beast of Bray Road, which is the story she really broke it. She named it, she broke it, and it's been such an interesting story about a cryptid, very similar to the Dogman. Some people believe they are the same creature. We're going to get into that, and she's also got a new book coming out next week, is I Know What I Saw. And other creatures involved in that, other stuff we're going to get into. So a lot of cryptid stuff, a lot to do with the Dogman tonight, because it's something I've wanted to do a show, and who better than Linda Godfrey. I've been reading her book, American Monsters, totally enjoying it, and I can't wait for her new book to come out next week and get my hands on a copy of that. And of course, we have every Sunday night is World Wide Web of Weird. We got a lot of weird stuff. There was so much, actually. I'm trying to cram a little bit of extra stuff into the World Wide Web of Weird if I can. There's one really good story I wish I could read to you, but it's one of those copyright ones. But I'm going to mention it and talk about it if I get a chance. Shared by listener Chandra. This story is so crazy. We'll get into that tonight. And of course, we will have the phone lines open later in the show. Linda will be on our one phone line, so we'll only have the other two open. I'll give those numbers out later in the show. But let's go ahead and get rolling on into it. Welcome to another night of Paranormal Soup. As I said before, I'm your host, Jason Bland. Tonight's guest, as I said before, Linda Godfrey. We're going to be talking to her after the World Wide Web of Weird. I am so truly honored to have her on this show. I've been interested. I've always had this interest in the Dogman, the Black Shuck, anything to do with something. It's really my interest in like the hellhounds and these beasts that guard the portals to hell, But this could be a real cryptoid creature. We could get into all that. There's so many different theories, so many different experiences that she's documented. I've been really loving this book. It came out a few years ago, I believe. It was American Monsters by Linda Godfrey. Really highly recommend. So we'll got a lot to talk about with her. But let me bring up my lovely co-host, Jamie D, I believe is here with us. So let's bring that up. For those listening on our radio network, we are a webcast. So you will come to our Facebook page or our Paranormal Soup YouTube page and see us, see the Paranormal Soup team. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
Doing well, thank you.
I'm looking forward to this one. Like I said, everybody's like, I forgot one friend of mine in grade school kept asking me, are you going to do a Dogman show? I'm really interested in Dogman. And I didn't even message him. Russ, I hope you tuned into this tonight. Here's the Dogman show. I told you I was going to tell him when I think I might have mentioned to him when I first booked her, but God, like you would remember. And then, of course, joining us from St. Augustine, Florida is Rob Autry himself. How you doing tonight, Rob?
Doing fabuloso.
Well, tonight we got a lot of weird. Rob's going to run it. So speaking of, let's go ahead and roll into the World Wide Web of Weird. Tonight, I figured we would start we've had the earthquakes, of course, happening in California. Then a lot of weird stuff happening. Climate change. It really is climate change. Where this one comes from, the BBC one, I got it summarized by Tim Binnell from Coast to Coast AM. Residents of Guadalajara, Mexico were astounded when a surprise hailstorm covered parts of the city with whopping 5 feet of ice. This looks like something out of the Day After Tomorrow. It really does. For those listening, like I said, on our Paranormal Soup radio network, you can hear of course you're hearing the show. You can watch the show on our Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup Facebook page or our YouTube channel, Paranormal Soup Jason Bland. For those watching on Facebook, please share. Facebook restricted me because I shared it out too much to so many groups. It tells, grow your channel, tell people about your show, but just not too much until you pay us. Exactly. Yeah, Facebook, fake book, whatever. All right, Mexican hail, ice, 1.5 meters thick, carpets, Guadalajara. Residents of Guadalajara, I'm going to butcher that all night, right? Mexico were astounded when they surprise hailstorm covered parts of the city with a whopping 5 feet of ice. The jaw-dropping event reportedly took place early Sunday morning, last week, of course, when temperatures suddenly plunged 14 degrees as the freak storm passed over the area for about 20 minutes. It was only 20 minutes long. Wow. Over the course of that seemingly brief period of time, a myriad of marble-sized pieces of hail plummeted from the sky and left behind quite the mess. When people in the city woke up the next morning, they discovered that the storm had dumped 5 feet of ice on their community. While a number of homes and cars were damaged by the strange incident, there were no injuries. Oddly enough, temperatures on the day before the storm had reached 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which made the wintry scene on Sunday particularly weird. On the bright side, officials expect that the warm weather will return soon and melt away any remaining ice. But, I mean, you look at these pictures for people listening, you can see the streets are just blanketed and it almost looks like cement. I mean, it's just thick. Cars completely engulfed in this. It's crazy. And then you have the earthquakes happening in California. This weird weather, weird geological stuff happening. It makes you a little worried. But let's move on. Number 2 in the World Wide Web of Weird, something I've been interested in, and we got a little bit of this with Barry Taff, Dr. Barry Taff, about exotic UFO technology by our government. Well, this article I found interesting from The Drive. U.S. Navy patented exotic UFO technologies. U.S. Navy appears to be developing exotic aircraft not dissimilar to UFOs recently sighted by its own pilots. Recently emerged that between 2007 and 2012, the Pentagon had been involved in a secretive $22 million project known as the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, which was set up to investigate credible signs of unidentified flying objects over the U.S. airspace. Among these were reports by U.S. Navy's pilots. We know they saw, what they saw. Now it turns out the U.S. Navy has, in fact, patented a whole host of exotic technology concepts, including a hybrid aerospace underwater craft capable of unparalleled maneuverability, so it'd be like a USO, both in the water and out of it, something that sounds a lot like the Navy's own pilots have been reporting. According to a report by TheDrive.com, the chief technical officer of the Navy Aviation Enterprise wrote a letter to the primary patent examiner to emphasize the importance of awarding the United States the patent because China is already investing significantly in such technology. Like China cares about your silly patent. I mean, seriously, like a patent's going to stop China from having this technology. Oh, my God. There are also U.S. Navy patents for high-frequency gravitational wave generators. I mean, that sounds just like right out of the Bob Lazar documentary, and electromagnetic force field generators, again, and even a craft using inertial mass reduction device, so anti-gravity. I mean, seriously, all this sounds just like the stuff Bob Lazar talked about them having in the 80s. Or, I mean, they talk about the TR-3B and, that's ours. And, I believe we definitely have some advanced technology. I don't know why they would put a patent on it. They really think that would stop China from having it in their own military. Like China doesn't care about copyrights of movies or patents on technology. They steal stuff all the time. Like, this really going to stop them with that. But that's from thedrive.com. All right, let's move on to Article 3. A man watching a webcam feed of a storm battering Lake Michigan could not believe his eyes when a mysterious and rather sizable creature popped out of the water. This, for people listening, this is a video. The puzzling sighting reportedly occurred a couple weeks ago when Tim Wenzel checked out a stream from a TV station camera focused on the pier leading out to a lighthouse on the lake. Now, I live right by Lake Michigan. We have our own lighthouse. It's not this one. So that's why I found this story interesting. The TV station cameras focused on the pier leading out to the lighthouse on the lake. As 40-mile winds swept over the area and waves crashed upon the site, a dark anomaly appears amid the chaos and seems to be washed over the pier to the other side of the water. The oddity caught on Wenzel's attention, and he managed to rewind the video and save the moment from the live stream to his computer. When he subsequently posted it to a Facebook page, he joked that the footage showed the monster being washed over the South Pier during the gale. As with all great creature videos, it is rather hard to discern what exactly Wenzel spotted, thanks in large part to the storm providing less than ideal filming conditions. But you see, like, for people listening, like, it almost... the rewind thing gets in the way of it. It almost has like a snake-like appearance, but then when it hits the pier, it kind of takes on like a sheet or something. Or I don't know. It makes me wonder if there's like a black tarp that somebody somehow got in the lake, and it's washed up to the pier. Bag? No, it's bigger than that. I mean, it's big. It'd have to be like a large tarp. It's the only thing I can think of. Or something. A what?
Tarp or a tent or something like that.
Right, yeah. So let's have a closer look. So this is it. Zoomed in a little more, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, it's odd. It has like kind of a snake thing look to it. But honestly, it's something getting washed up. It could be, like I said, like I don't know. It's weird. Right there is where it looks like it's got like a snake-like body almost. I don't know.
For a second, it looks like it washes up on whatever's right there and then kind of slid back into the water.
Yeah. It's weird. This next video isn't paranormal, but man, I would piss myself. We're going to talk about, these dogman encounters and how people react. Well, this comes from India Today. Video shows bikers terrifying tiger escape. Horrifying footage shows a moment. Tiger comes bolting out of the jungle after a speeding motorcycle. Go ahead and play it, and with sound if you can there, Rob. You hear the guy screaming. Oh, I got an echo there. You hear the guy like screaming and under his motorcycle hub. Play it one more time.
I'm freaking out.
Yeah. The video was filmed by 2 officers from the Indian state of Karnataka, I totally butchered that, who had been traveling near the border when they spotted the tiger rushing towards them from the trees. As the huge cat leaps onto the road, the efforts to apprehend the men, the bike accelerates forward as fast as it can go. It looks more like a moped, narrowly avoiding the tiger's efforts to catch. I want to be on like a crotch rocket taking off, man. The last glimpse of the animal shows it returning to the undergrowth on the other side of the road. The bikers miraculously escaped the tiger attack. The original video caption reads, "The incident happened on Saturday. A biker was traveling from Guadalupe in the Chamar." I'm not going to try to butcher that that's way out of, no way I'm saying that. The tiger chased the bikers, but the biker drove faster and escaped. But I swear somebody peed that seat on that moped, or both of them.
Yeah.
I would have.
Yeah. More than the carbs on my bike and my pants.
Well, tonight, Linda, I was talking to her before the show. She's got some stuff in her new book coming out about, Black Panthers being spotted. And even in the United States, I know a lot of it in England, but she said even in the United States, I mean, these creatures could be still out there in the wood. I was scared of running into a mountain lion when I used to go camping, I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I've been in a park here, and a big cat came out of the woods, and yeah, man. Yeah,
really?
Luckily, it saw me and ran, but yeah, I mean, I was ready to hit my pants.
I would be. All right, let's move on. All right, so this one, there's an audio file, Rob, with this, and a picture. I forgot to mention this before the show. This is from Wales Online, and I've seen this very viral. A mysterious screams plague couple in Wales. Alan and Christine Tate have recorded hundreds of hours of strange and unsettling sounds beneath their home. The couple first became aware of the sound back in June of 2018 when, upon entering the kitchen to make coffee one evening, Christine thought she could hear something strange. It was like a flushing noise that I heard at first. I told Alan about it, and then I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. He left his phone in the bathroom with the recorder on to try to pick up the source of the noise, and then we could hear a machine running. We started to record all over the house, and we picked up the sounds of chains, a motorbike starting, and people screaming. Over the next few months, the couple recorded hundreds of hours of unexplained and sometimes disturbing sounds seemingly coming from somewhere underneath their property. The enigma has spooked them so much that they now spend their time touring around the country attempting to raise awareness and looking for answers. I really want an explanation, said Alan. Why are there people screaming? The couple's current theory is that there are people living and working in rooms in tunnels below the house, possibly in relation to drug manufacturing or human trafficking. Does that really go on in Wales? So far, however, the police have found no evidence of wrongdoing at the property. We want as many people as possible to know about this so that the police are urged to carry out a more thorough investigation, said Alan. We don't want to go back until the matter has been resolved. Go ahead and play the audio if you can, Rob. Otherwise, I could play it on my end.
Getting that?
Yeah.
Okay. That'd be pretty freaky.
Listen. Now, what is that?
Oh, hell no.
Sounds just like my jackhammer I just used in my basement. That's what I think.
I'm out of there.
That's obviously sirens.
Yeah.
See, my theory...
Like a weird bird?
See, my theory is on this is that, they want explanations, and they said the police checked it out. I would love to know what they thought. But, this is all coming from under the house. Is there some place they're doing construction down the road or, a manhole left uncovered or something that's picking up all this noise? Because you hear the motorbikes. The kids screaming is a little bit weird. Actually, when you play it, when I hear it, I think of Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall. The kids in the background. And it's just like,
That is...
That is a little weird. That is a little weird. But it could be somebody drilling.
Yeah, it could be a drill.
I don't know.
But that's something you don't want to hear in the middle of the night in your house.
But the first part, I swear, sounds like, Pink Floyd's Another Brick Wall, like, you laddie, you in the red shirt, stand still, laddie. That's what I...
Can't have your pudding if you don't hear me.
That's what it reminds me of. But yeah, so let's move on before we run out of time, though. But it's weird, but I think there could be a plausible explanation like that. Acoustics can go far. All right, number 6. Unseen forces knocked down shelf in tavern. Footage emerged this week of an alleged poltergeist activity causing havoc in an historic pub in England. The video, which was filmed in Ye Old Shambles Tavern in York, shows supervisor Luke Smithinson, working at the bar when a stack of boxes and other items are suddenly come flying off the nearby shelf. Rob's playing the video here. Go ahead and play the video. And you see, like, all these boxes. Yeah, like shelving stuff come flying off. It doesn't look like something fell. It looks like it flew off. I was just about to do my... This is from Luke here. I was just about to do my second line clean. I walked around the bar and suddenly everything just flew from the shelves. As the boxes flew all over the bar, a couple of glasses came off as well. There was a proper force behind it. Even the speaker on the top shelf was knocked down. That's what I say. The question is what's on that other side of the wall? Is there another establishment, or is that all part of the building? The building itself is no stranger to paranormal occurrences, with staff members previously reporting the sound of mysterious disembodied footsteps echoing in the rooms after closing time. Whether something otherworldly accounts for this particular occurrence, however, remains unclear. There's a lot of logical explanations. I'm sure it could, stuff to test out to see what did it. But if they've had other haunting things, maybe. But man, it really looks like it flew off the wall.
Yeah.
Well, it had some force behind it. Something would have had to knock that wall behind it. You think he'd hear something or find something obvious to why that got thrown so far off the wall.
Looking like, what in the...
Yep, time to go home.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Number 7, fake Roswell alien autopsy video may have been real. This is from Unexplained Mysteries, and I've seen a lot of people talking about this. The 17-minute grainy black and white video that appeared to show 3 government pathologists in full-body hazmat suits, remember this? Examining and dissecting a pale, pot-bellied alien corpse that was found in Roswell UFO crash in 1947 may in fact be authentic. I really don't think so. The alien autopsy tape was released in 1995 after Ray Santilli claimed to have received the video in 1992 from a retired cameraman with the U.S. military. He ended up selling the alien video to several television stations. I remember I was totally enthralled with this when I was a kid. He ended up selling the alien video to several television stations in 33 different countries. It was only when another filmmaker named Spiros Malaris admitted that the two had faked the entire video that the world finally relaxed after much fear and paranoia consumed the world when they believed that an autopsy was being conducted on an actual alien. However, there's now a new twist that indicates the footage was in fact real. A leaked 2001 memo was supposedly sent to aerospace billionaire Robert Bigelow from physicist Eric Davis that alleges a former CIA scientist named Kit Green was briefed 3 different times during and after his tenure at the CIA on topics relative to UFOs and the Roswell incident and the alien autopsy video. It's believed that the leaked information originated from the late astronaut Edgar Mitchell's archives. The part of the memo reads, after Kit left the CIA, he was called into the Pentagon by a person in uniform. It went on to say this person showed Kit the alien autopsy photos and reports that when in 2001 Kit evaluated the information, gave him his professional opinion of what he had been briefed on. Apparently the evidence that was shown to Kit was of the same corpse that was seen in 1995's video footage. But does that mean it's real? This is my thing, is that our government puts stuff out there, disinformation. All the people in the UFO community talk about the disinformation the government puts out there. Who's to say they wouldn't use some fake and try to put it out there? I don't know. I mean, and it's also possible that they got some other filmmaker to say, oh yeah, I helped hoax that, and he didn't, and it is a real deal. I've been up in the air on that video for years. It looks like it could be real, but my gut instinct always, from the very beginning when I saw it, is that I felt it was fake. Even though it was well done and it looks totally real, I just felt it was fake. Maybe I'm wrong.
Who knows?
All right. Well, the last thing, I don't have a picture or video or article I can read because it's one of those do not redistribute, things. But Chandra, a fan of the show, tagged me on this, so you can find it on my profile. I'm tagged on. I think it should be public. I don't know. I think who had this? Let's see. It came from kget.net. I know Fox News has it. It's basically from Chesterfield County, Virginia. A Chesterfield family spoke with 8 News Friday after fending off a naked intruder who broke in her home. Well, this naked intruder, all they say is she had a blue ponytail. That's all they really describe her. But you go read this story. It's completely crazy. This guy basically, or this woman, breaks into these people's home. The father tells her to get out, gets his gun. He ends up firing. He said his description of her is what's really crazy is that, you know, he tells her to get out and she's laughing crazily or whatever, and she tells him she's the devil, and he says she has black saucers for eyes. Her eyes are completely black, and that and this is real. I mean, go check this out. KGET.net. They should have the article there. But he fired like rounds out of his pistol at her, and they're not really clear if he hit her. Sounded like he hit her with the gun. I mean, if you see the carnage of these poor people's home, they just moved in, I think. There's bullet holes everywhere. There's blood everywhere. The whole family ended up fighting her. It all ended when the 12-year-old son stuck a wrench into her neck. And she still lived. She's in the hospital recovering. You know, this is definitely one of those. Oh, hold on.
Drugs are bad. Okay.
You know, Flocka probably or something. But the whole, he described her having the strength of 4 men. I mean, it took the whole family, the 12-year-old son even in on it, fighting her. You know, I mean, I've seen the videos of people on Flocka. They are crazy. Like the guy, like jumping through a car window, completely naked. They're always naked, you know. But man, that stuff scares me. It scares me more than the dogmen or of course, One Am I Out in the Woods, or ghosts or demons or whatever. I mean, some people think Flocka opens you up to demon possession. That's why these people have all this strength and their eyes turn black. And I don't know. But it scares the living heck out of me. I've had some weird encounters on the street I live in, you know, like in the middle of the night, people, like one lady trying to get in my house all crazily, you know. But the Flocka and the synthetic cocaine or bath salts, all that stuff scares the living heck out of me. In this story, go read it, people. It will scare you. People scare me. They really, really scare me. And this person was either on drugs or completely possessed or both. I don't know, but this story is right out of a horror movie. And this poor family went through it and are going to be probably seeing psychological help because of their experience. So that's it for the World Wide Web of Weird tonight. Our guest is Linda Godfrey, author of American Monsters, her new book coming out next week. I Know What I Saw. We're going to have her on, and we will have the phone lines open up later in the show. But that's it for the World Wide Web of Weird. Don't forget, we have a Patreon. Go check us out on Patreon. Donate $2 a month. You get access to soon. I'm moving my studio back to my house. I'll be doing podcasts going exclusively to my $2 Patreons. Also, tonight, go head over to YouTube. We have Super Chat enabled. I'm learning how it works, so bear with me. But we have Super Chat enabled, and it helps donate to the show. Of course, YouTube gets a cut, but hey, you help the show. And maybe we can get that way. We get a question using Super Chat to us. Jamie and Rob are looking for your questions there, so hopefully you guys call it out. All right, guys, we'll be back after this short commercial break.
You were brought here for one purpose, necromancy.
A ceremony dating back to the pre-Christian era. It's the art of reviving the dead. It requires involvement with evil spirits by the person performing the act.
The devil god brings life to the dead.
No, please. No, please.
And death to the living. Necromancy, starring Orson Welles and Pamela Franklin. From Cinerama releasing, in color, rated PG, parental guidance suggested.
If you are interested in discovering the truth about the paranormal and want to hear from leading researchers in the field, join Justin Brown on his 3 weekly shows named My Paranormal Soapbox, Necromancer Live Show, and the Supernatural Symposium, live on Facebook, YouTube, and InterfaceDeath.net.
He is conducting an experiment into the combined effects of sensory deprivation and hallucinatory drugs. The subject of the experiment is himself, and the experiment is out of control. Ken Russell's Altered States, a film that must not be missed, is in the West End now. Altered States, Certificate X.
Hello, I am Fernando Martinez. I think by now you know I am an emotional kind of guy. People stop me in the street and say, Fernando, what the hell is wrong with me? Silk shirt, hairy chest, enough aftershave to drown a household pet, but I still cannot get a woman. I tell them you are an ignorant fool. Without a symbol of power and fertility around your neck, what kind of woman is going to respect you? That is why I have teamed up with Medallion Man, the shop for medallion needs. Medallion Man caters to all levels of masculinity. For the strong, silent type, a medallion the size of a hubcap will say everything that needs to be said. Even singing medallions for the Casanova, who knows music is the food of love. Model trains, dollhouses, diapers, whatever your interest, we've got a medallion for you. Don't forget, every woman knows if you can't support a medallion, you can't support a family.
This is the sound of a space clock aboard a U.S. satellite 180 miles above the Earth. No one winds up this timepiece. It's powered by a tiny battery, a battery that delivers power for years without replacement. Now the same type of battery, the Duracell battery, can bring new reliability and long life to your battery-operated equipment. Radios, cameras, toys, all run far longer. Duracell batteries, the long-distance power cells, outlast any ordinary battery. The same type of battery that keeps space clocks running for years can bring long life to anything powered by batteries. Dura, as in durable. Cell, as in power cell. The Duracell battery, made by Mallory.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Switch to DCS ranging.
240, nominal to profile.
We're in the pipe, 5 by 5.
Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guest is author Linda Godfrey. Author, investigator, artist, Linda Godfrey is author of 18 books on strange creatures, phenomenon, and people. She's a frequent guest on national TV and radio shows, including Monsterquest, Season 1 and 4, Fox News Red Eye, Lost Tapes, Monsters and Mysteries, Sean Hannity's America, Inside Edition, Coast to Coast AM, Wisconsin Public Radio, the Jenny McCarthy Show, and many more. She lives in Kettle Moraine area of southeastern Wisconsin with her husband and monster dog, Grendel. I've been reading her book, American Monsters, Histories of Monster Lore and Legends, Sightings in America. I'm really, truly enjoying this book. I kind of skipped ahead to some of the Dogman stuff because that's what I was really excited to get into tonight, and we definitely are. Her newest book coming out next week, I was informed, is I Know What I Saw, Modern Day Encounters with Monsters of New Urban Legend and Ancient Lore. So I definitely want to get into this. She told me little tidbits about what's coming in that book. So there's some other monsters I want to get into tonight, of course. But we're going to definitely talk about Dogmen and other creatures. You'll be able to call in probably after the second commercial break. I'll give out those phone lines a little bit later in the show. But let's go ahead and get to our guest. Are you there with me, Linda?
Hello, how are you tonight?
Doing good. Thank you for joining us tonight. I gave a little brief description of you, but I'd love you to tell the audience how this all started, because I think it's a great story, how you got involved first really with the Beast of Bray Road.
Right. Well, that was the name that I gave it myself. And this happened back in 1991, 92. In fact, it was right on the cusp of those 2 years. It was New Year's Eve weekend that the story was published. And for about a month before that, I'd been researching a story that I'd received a tip for it from a woman in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, which is the southeastern part of the state. And I lived there with my husband and my monster dog. Well, at the time it was a different monster dog, but I was new at the newspaper. I had been doing cartoons and illustrations for them for about a year because my actual goal was to be a syndicated cartoonist, and I was trying both as an editorial cartoonist and as a comic strip type of cartoonist. And I had been working really hard on that and come very close and was just kind of, dejected that I wasn't making any real headway. And so I went to the county newspaper and asked if I could just do editorial cartoons for them for free. And they actually paid me $8 whole a week.
Oh, wow. Whopping big money there.
It wasn't the Depression either. It really was just kind of a token payment. But people liked them, and I started doing some strips just for the paper and illustrations. And this had gone on for about a year. They were really great people to work with. I liked it there. And one day I was talking to the then editor, and he said, "Hey, you know what? How would you like to be a reporter? Our reporter just quit. Our main reporter just quit." And I really didn't think about it long. I thought to myself, well, I always liked to write, and it seemed like kind of a fun thing to do. My degree was in art education, and I had taught art in public schools also, but this seemed like something that would really go along real well with the cartooning. So I said, sure, I'd be glad to. And wouldn't you know, one of the first tips that I got, one of the first things that I heard was that there was a creature out on this country road. It leads from Elkhorn goes maybe 3 to 4 miles, something like that, eastward toward Burlington. Just farm fields. It's kind of a shortcut to the hospital. Nothing like a big spooky road.
Right.
And people are saying that they saw what looks like a werewolf to them. And I laughed. I think everybody was sort of chuckling about it at the time because it just seemed really preposterous. And, it just wasn't anything. I mean, I actually was probably more aware than most people of things like Bigfoot and UFOs and that sort of stuff because my dad was into that. He had a UFO follow him while he was riding in a pickup truck with some friends up north. He was from northern Wisconsin. And this light followed them, and he would never say at any kind of stop, and we could never, then he wouldn't talk again about it for years, and then he'd say a little bit. And I always felt there was a story I hadn't heard, but it gave him a lifelong interest. And then in turn, having those things. And he was a hunter and a fisherman, so we had all those early magazine stories that had Ivan Sanderson telling about tracking the Yeti and the Bigfoot and that kind of thing. So all those were sort of in my fringe of awareness, but never had I heard modern-day people talking about something they thought was a werewolf,
Right.
just seemed like fairy tale stuff to me. And all out on this road, you know, and in my hometown. It just seemed kind of crazy. So I dug around a bit and was finding out that, yes, indeed, people were saying this. Some of them I recognized names. And it happened that I was working with our county animal control officer sort of right off the bat because he had some ongoing things happening. One was involving a puppy mill, an illegitimate puppy mill, and the other one, there were some problems with bags of mutilated dog carcasses found in several places around the county. Not on Bray Road, and they did have possible other explanations because not too far south into Illinois from there was a dog racing track. So, and later there was one right in Walworth County itself, too. And it's a sad but true fact that when many racing dogs aren't performing well, they just, you know, get rid of them in whatever way is expedient. Yeah, and so it was, I thought at the time, well, that's, and I still think that really has no proven connection, but it made the whole thing a little bit spookier, you know?
Yeah.
And so I ended up, I was at his office, and county office, and I said, have you heard about this thing people are saying they saw out on Bray Road? And got this kind of funny look on his face, and he said, you mean this? And he opened his file drawer and pulled out a manila file folder, and honest to goodness, it was labeled werewolf.
Oh, I love it.
You know, you can't make that kind of stuff
up.
And so, you know, when I told the editor that, because we'd all been sort of on the fence about doing this thing at all, you know, because if it turns, you don't know for sure until you really investigate if it's hoaxes or whatever. But when you have a county officer with a manila file folder that is labeled werewolf, you know,
that's news.
Yeah, that's news. You cannot deny that. People have the right to know that, whatever they think. So that made this story real, and he shared the contact information with me because he said people had been either calling him or writing him and saying, I saw this thing. I don't know what it was, but if there was such a thing as werewolves, this would be it. And they described something that was 6 to 7 feet tall, covered with dark brown, very, very, very furry all over its body. So that I should interject here, so that a recent TV conclusion that it was a bear with mange is highly unlikely.
Yeah, I've heard that before too about this, and I everybody describes fur, you know, lots of fur and hair. A bear, if you've seen the pictures of bear with mange, they are frightening, but they're frightening because they have no fur.
They're also very sick. If you get an animal to that point where it has almost no fur left, or giant patches, they don't last very long after that, and they certainly wouldn't be doing the things that this was reported doing. People saw it crouching in the ditch holding what looked like a piece of roadkill or a haunch of deer, something like that. One woman saw it holding this meat with its palms turned up.
Right.
You know, like a human would do, almost. And it was chasing junior high kids who were out in the country trying to skate on a pond and that sort of thing, which doesn't sound like a sick animal.
Right.
And it was much too big to be a coyote. You know, there just weren't really any great explanations about it. So the thing that really impressed me, though, was that when I began making my personal visits to these people who were reporting, and most of them were just fine and dandy with telling me about it, although it disturbed them. I could tell when they began going through the event for me, some would get they'd start sweating, they would turn white again or get tears in their eyes, and they were refeeling these emotions because it hadn't been very long for most of them. There were a few that went back as far as, I think the earliest was 1981.
Well, that's what I was wondering is when he started keeping this file, you know, these were, you're getting some of the contacts, these people left their information with him. You don't just leave that with a county official. You know, my name, here's my number. If you're going to hoax it, you know, you could get in trouble.
Right, you can get prosecuted for fraud, for causing public safety hazard by, you know, jumping out in the road, that all kinds of things, you know. So I thought they were honest, and that, it would have been, you're exactly right. You don't do that if you think somebody's going to pursue you legally, so if you're caught. And there were, you know, I did kind of check around, and there were 2 young boys who had werewolf masks, I guess, that 1 year had kind of jumped out of the corn at some people. Mm-hmm. But that didn't fit either. The dates did not mesh. That happened before these phone calls were made. And there were a few like that afterwards, too. I know pretty much about all of them. And that doesn't surprise me because there are always people who want to, kind of...
Shenanigans.
Joke on the reporter, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these people, though, seemed very honest. The other thing that impressed me was they were a very diverse group. There was an African-American girl in high school. There were some junior high kids. There was a middle-aged, somewhat elderly woman who had a nighttime factory job, several farmers, a man who had high clearance at Milwaukee Public Airport.
Oh.
And, just different people that all together just seems like a very credible bunch, and a couple of them sort of knew each other, which it'd be crazy if no one knew each other in such a small town and small area.
How big is Elkhorn? How many people live in Elkhorn, roughly? Do you know?
I'm thinking right now, and this includes some outer lake areas. It's not all just within the city limits proper, but I'm thinking it's like 5,000.
Oh, that's not a lot, no.
No, and it was less then, so this is 27 years later, and there's been a lot of construction since then. So it did surprise me. In fact, the way the person who told me about it drove a school bus, and she heard it from somebody who was on the school bus. And so, those kinds of associations are very normal. But otherwise, by and large, they didn't really know each other. It wasn't like a big group of friends that you'd be expecting to make something like that up.
Right.
And so all of that seemed to be checking out, and I gave them their choice of being known by their names or having anonymous surnames put in their place. And they all chose to remain anonymous at first, although they later changed their own minds because the TV station started calling as soon as that ran. TV and radio, all the local ones at first, then Milwaukee, Madison, Chicago, and then it just spread out to the coast. And people have to realize that in 91, 92, we did not have the internet as we know it now. Right. And if you had your own cell phone, that was a pretty big deal.
Well, yeah, it definitely didn't get on the internet for you. For one,
no,
I remember the DSL line you get on and trying to do research on the internet. Not that there's a lot on the internet at that time, but it takes you forever just to get the website loaded.
And if you had any kind of a website on the internet, you were considered, and this is like maybe 10 years later, around the year 2000, I remember doing a story, and that was big news. If somebody had their own website on the internet. But see, back then, what it meant was, nowadays we would say it went viral. We couldn't say that then because there was no such thing as going viral. So
it was the AP.
Yeah, it was out on AP, and that kind of spread it fairly quickly once it hit that. But it did become sort of a sensation for a while. And my editor and I remember talking with him and him saying, well, people are going to have fun with it for a couple of weeks, and then it's just going to blow over and be one of those things you talk about at the campfire. And I agreed. I mean, I had no experience at all at that thing, and I couldn't imagine it going on. But instead, almost immediately, people began trying to reach me. And to do this again, they couldn't just my email. They had to either dig up the newspaper's address and write a snail mail, or find the phone number and then make a phone call, on a landline.
They had they had to have a reason for contacting you. They weren't, it took some effort.
Exactly. It wasn't easy, and yet they did it. And they were saying things like, this is not a joke, it's not fake. It happened to me. I saw it such and such, or my grandfather saw it. And there was also, to kind of corroborate that further, I received a call from a man in Traverse City, Michigan, who was a DJ, who said, this is not a joke. He said, I did a thing a couple of years ago. This was in 1987, where he said, I made up kind of a ballad song about the dog man of Michigan. And he said, some of it I even made up. And I played it on April Fool's Day, trying to sell the CDs to make money for an animal shelter. And people started calling in and saying, hey, this is no April Fool's Day. The same the same thing they said to me. You know, it's not funny.
It's real.
My grandfather, I thought, yeah, it's a real thing. And he had even made up this thing about it coming out the 7th year of every decade. You know, so he had his own handmade, but that wasn't what they were responding to. They were responding to the description of the creatures that was exactly like the description giving on Bray Road, which led me to believe that this, combined with other ones, I mean, I was getting them from down south, Georgia, Louisiana, around the East Coast, Canada. I remember one from the Virgin Islands, and I thought...
Virgin Islands even?
Yes, almost right. It was one of the earliest ones, actually.
Really?
And I thought, this just is not a little everyday hometown phenomenon. This is a worldwide phenomenon, and there's something to it, because why would all these people be seeing something that was thought to have gone out in the medieval days and just remained as, you know, the stuff of Stephen King movies and, you know, those really...
What I think of, honestly, what comes to my mind is one of my favorite movies from when I was a kid was Silver Bullet, Stephen King.
Yes, that is my favorite Stephen King movie.
Yes.
I have it on record in several places.
Yeah, I have a 3-year-old obsessed with werewolves. He loves anything spooky. We have to, like, limit him, you know. He begged me, because I have it on DVD, I want this. I want to watch this. I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. And I let him watch, like, 10 minutes of it. He was like, turn it off. I'm like, see? He screamed to watch it. He's, like, so obsessed. Years later, Liam, if you watch me doing this show, here now you understand. But does it look like the werewolf? I've heard you in interviews and I've read the book. You don't believe it's a werewolf, like a shape-shifting person.
No, and I mean, there are a couple of caveats to that, because there are a few cultural things like the Navajo skinwalker and you know, some others. But it's still not the same thing as portrayed in Hollywood, where the human body, the solid human body, is changing bodily form, literally growing the teeth before your eyes, and the hair is growing, you know, coming out of the pores, and then it's, you know, it still looks sort of human, and it may leave some clothing on, and it runs around and tries to eat people and bite people, and then, you know, they're changed at the full moon. And most of that is Hollywood made-up stuff. And I've even done tracking on my last book, Monsters Among Us. Wherever there was a date, a good enough date and location, I looked up things like solar flares, moon phases.
Yeah, full moon? You know, do these things happen with the full moon?
Not according to my little mini study, which, you know, admittedly small, but I had a lot more correspondence with large solar flares than I did with full moons. And actually,
that's really interesting.
The 3/4 moon had more than the full moon, which I thought was interesting. Although there are I'm not going to get into all the jargon, but anyway, it is not necessarily the full moon that brings these things out. My own personal opinion is that there may sometimes be more incidents reported under the full moon because we can see them.
True.
You know, if there's a nice full moon and something's running across the field, you can see it. You know, if it's just a small moon, you would find it a lot darker and wouldn't be able to maybe recognize it. So
are most of the reportings at night? I'm sorry to interrupt, but are most of the reportings at night or during the day? Or, I mean, when do you see more? Is it more often at night?
Yes, yeah. And daytime sightings are not unheard of at all. But I once went through a big pile of just kind of random letters about them, and generally the most sightings were between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., which is when you would expect any kind of a nighttime animal, and I think they're probably following deer or something like that, and pretty much following the same hours that I think a natural wolf pack would. So, and they retain a lot of and the thing is that just standing on hind legs is not a supernatural act. It does not make anything a werewolf.
True.
You can find any mammal can do it if it's either motivated or trained to do it. Sometimes it's because they have injured front paws.
I have experience with that, Linda. My grandparents had a dog. Now, it wasn't their this dog actually did a headstand and walked. Its back legs got ran over by a car, and they took this dog in, but when they found it, they'd be like, what is that? What is that? It's a dog that was doing a headstand and would walk that way.
Poor thing. Yeah, and there have been a couple. If you go to YouTube, there are a couple different videos on Faith, the Wonder Dog, who had kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Was the front paws and could walk upright. There's another one. If you put bipedal bear in the search on YouTube, there's wonderful footage of this bear that resorted to a suburban neighborhood because it couldn't really hunt very well anymore. But it walks and runs just beautifully on its
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, so there was only one other thing about this creature that people were seeing on Bray Road, and then I've heard it from so many other people since. And again, it's not necessarily supernatural, but people kind of felt that it was. They said, I was watching it in my headlights, and it stopped and turned and stared me in the eyes, and I felt, they'll say something like, it wasn't like words in English, but I felt it was saying to me, I'm better than you are. If I wanted to, I could jump up on your car. Or another one was, don't tell anyone or I'll get you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I saw the Travel Channel episode. They did was it Search of Monsters, Bray Road. You were in that. And that's one of the things that came to me about some of the witnesses they had on there. It seemed all of them had this eye contact moment with it. And it
Very, very, very many. I wouldn't say all of them over time have, but a lot have, a larger percentage than you would think. Because to them, that it feels like it's kind of a psychic thing, but it's nothing you can really put your finger on. And I try to always keep my reporter's hat on, and play the devil's advocate, because it can be that we're misinterpreting their body language or their facial expression, because we're not normally used to dealing with predators like that. And so they may be thinking they're telling us one thing, and we may be misinterpreting it as something else. But they all still feel really weird about it. And then the other thing is that many of them say it's often portrayed as this hugely muscled, meat grabbing sort of thing that is, pumped up like a professional wrestler. And the thing is, most people are not really afraid that they're in danger of being eaten by it. A lot of times they're in the car, it's out on the road.
Right.
Once in a while they meet it on a trail, but even then they say it doesn't really lunge at them. It just kind of goes away if it can, or maybe chases them for a minute and then veers off. So it's not that it's, really fearsome that way. What scares them is that they look at it and many of them use the analogy of those old flip cards, the Rolodex, where you're flipping through this Rolodex trying to find something, and said my brain was like a Rolodex. I'm trying to figure out what this thing is. And when I realized I didn't know what it was because it wasn't acting like a normal wolf or dog would act, that's when I got scared. And that's when, even the men who describe themselves as like 6'5" and, manly men, they'll admit wetting their pants or, just having terrible fear reactions because they cannot put a name to it. They don't know what it is.
It makes you wonder, because that's what when I saw that I watched that recently, that Search of Monsters on Travel Channel. It was what hit me is it seemed that everybody they put on there that had this experience with dogmen, there was like this, like I said, the eye contact and this thing's passing along something to them. I don't think any of them said it was like a telepathic message, but it just seemed like there's something in its features or something's being conveyed to them. Even in your book, American Monsters, one story stuck on my mind of a couple that were skiing. This wasn't Bray Road, but their dogman encounter, the way that this guy shot a gun at it, a small caliber gun, and it's like it knew it was small caliber. It like conveyed. The wife said it conveyed like basic. She was going to take a picture,
right?
And it conveyed to her, if you take a photo, I will kill you. And I thought that was kind of haunting.
Yeah, it did not mind the gun at all. But when she put the camera up, then that gave her the look, and then actually ran back into the woods because they don't. It's really weird. They do seem to fear cameras more than guns.
And that's interesting. And that experience, it was in your American Monsters book that I'm reading. That story really stuck out in my mind in this book because just like one, it knew it was a small caliber gun. That's the sense she got. This is coming from the witness, but she also felt it knew what a camera was, that her phone had a camera. So that's a lot of knowledge for just a creature. So it seems like it's something beyond just a creature in some of these experiences. I'm a big interdimensional guy. I really get into the idea of walk-in creatures and things that could be slipping in from other dimensions. And we'll get into that more tonight. But when people see this thing, when they're getting this feeling, what's it? I want to give it an idea. What does the typical Beast of Bray Road or Dogman look like? What are we looking at? What are people seeing?
Sure. Well, most people describe something that is between 5.5 to 7 feet tall. They'll say it had a head like a wolf or a German Shepherd with pointy ears on top of the head, which totally eliminates Bigfoot because,
right.
They may have slightly elongated faces, but it's not like these very long pointed muzzles with very sharp canine teeth hanging down. And so that's one thing that makes it different. The eyes shine. If they're shining their truck or car light on it and there's a shine back from the eyes, it's usually yellow-green, which is a normal canine color. Once in a while, someone will report red glowing eyes, but in those types, it's usually identifiable as some type of a phantom creature, because there are, just like there are things that mimic humans, I think that there are things that mimic our natural animals. I've come to that conclusion.
I think that, too. I had what I called a shadow person experience over a few months, and I felt like it tortured me and did all kinds of things, and then I won't get into the whole story, but I had an event that it seemed to get it away from me, but there was a time later in my life when I was really sick, really sick, and I was living in a haunted home, but I felt like I saw the shadow person again, like it was trying to get back to me. I know this is a crazy story, but for the first time in all these years, I felt like, and here's a sequel to the story people haven't heard, I felt like this thing showed me its face. It turned like this reddish glow in the shadow form, and the face was like a beast. It looked like a werewolf face in the shadow I saw. And... Wow. And that was like the last time I ever saw this scene, and it was years before that I had the real horrible encounter with it. But I've always wondered, these shadow person experiences, are they, mimicking different things? Could they be, turn into different creatures? And because this thing, my whole point of the shadow person thing is it fed off my fear. Mm-hmm. And I believe there are entities that they will appear whatever to get a reaction out of you to feed off that energy.
Right. Yeah, it's like they're provoking some sort of emotion from you that they feed off of you, and I don't think those are the same things at all that people are seeing like out on Bray Road. And I think that they look fearsome, but I believe really that what they're mostly trying to do is get people to leave their territory, because they do seem territorial to me, and that's a very different thing. And they're generally not seen as a shadow. The shadow things, I do believe, can change shape, change form, and that they're completely different. They don't have the same abilities and qualities that
could be a relation between the two, if they're both supernatural entities in a sense.
It's possible that there's some sort of attachment, or that it's like in the same way that human beings that are trained and that practice this can send out thought forms from their body that can sometimes seem real.
Right, like perhaps. A tulpa. We've talked about that a lot on this show.
Yeah, and tulpa, exactly. Maybe there are wolf-like creatures that can send their shadow auras or whatever out. I don't know. This is all pure conjecture.
Yeah, of course it is. And like you said, there's also the whole Native American skinwalker aspect too, that you get mixed into this too.
Spirit guardians, and then. And some people believe that there are, and I'm not one to naysay because I've heard some reports like this, that there are a more vicious variety that are bigger and wider, and have more human-like body shapes, more humanoid.
More like a werewolf.
More like what you would think of as a werewolf. Although, if you go back to some of those original encounters in France, the creatures themselves, once the person is turned, are not these big, puffed-out, wrestler-looking types of beings. They look most of the time like a regular wolf, the same size. They're not described as, they're lurking around about the sheep and the shepherdess is, has an eye on them, but she doesn't immediately take them for a werewolf. They look like regular wolves. So they managed to do a lot of damage. I mean, there were some of them that were said to have eaten like 100 people or more.
You mentioned France is it's slipping my mind. I probably butchered the name of it. The classic case.
Yeah, Beast of Gévaudan.
Yeah, see, I would butcher that. So thank you. But yeah, I've always been fascinated by that story, and there's a lot of different theories to what happened then. But people died. It was killing people. The town took it very seriously, and but that sounded like a wolf, like a like a real wolf. Some people thought it was like a trained Tasmanian tiger, or not tiger, or what was it? I forgot. Somebody thought it was even somebody brought another species of animal and trained it to kill people.
Yeah, hyenas have been one of the things, and sometimes wolves do have these sort of ruffs around the back of their necks, depending on what climate they're living in. It seems to be more prominent other way, which remind people of a hyena. But hyenas do have quite a bit different face. They have the squared. They've got the different lengths. Their legs are different lengths, and they really don't look like a wolf. And I think if they had been a hyena, although who knows, in that time not many people were familiar with zoos or might have known what a hyena was. So I don't entirely throw that idea out the window either. But generally, the ones people see along the roads don't look at all like that. And there are several different types. And some people call them different species, but I would hesitate that because I don't think some of them are earthly enough to be called an animal species. There's some other form. Some people think that we live side by side or even overlapping into another reality that's always that's always here, that's just always here and covers the entire globe, and that its inhabitants, some of them have the ability to get solidified enough to come here and take form and stay that way long enough to reproduce. The theory is they can't reproduce as easily in their other state, so they come here to reproduce and eat and learn things about humans, observe them, and that would be your upright canine-like creature, and Bigfoot would be another one, and some of perhaps the large
I've never heard the
cat.
reproduce part about it. That's interesting, that they would have to come here for that. You wonder, why would they come here? I mean, just to sightsee,
Right, but when they're here, people see them, eating, and they leave behind droppings and have saliva and seem to need sleep and all the things that an animal does. And wherever I can, I've interviewed Native Americans who are preferably elders. I had one that was an elder and an anthropologist, and they're prevalent culture stories about these creatures, which are more than just stories to them. And this is not everywhere, but most of the people that I've talked to, which counts for a different tribes, say that to them the Bigfoot and the upright canine-like creature came from what they call the spirit world. We might call it another dimension or another sort of world or whatever, but that they came originally from there. They're older than man, that they can go back and forth between the portal, because they know where the portals are. They call them doors to the spirit world, and usually they are in or near freshwater springs, or the spring itself would be considered the portal. And that they come here and do all those things, and that it's easier to reproduce because they have actual solid materials to do that with. And where they are, it's not as conducive. The electrons are farther apart, put it that way.
Right.
In that big soup that all of us are supposed to be composed of. But Earth, we humans and all of the other natural animals that we know about are composed of basically earth. Minerals make up our bodies, our bones, different types of minerals and fats. And it's hard to do that if you live in a place that doesn't have solids as we know and perceive them. And again, it's all in the perception. Because these stories are things that have been handed down it's hard to tell how much sometimes is metaphor and what is intended as actual information. But it has always just made sense to me that if they're coming for something important, and there have been so many sightings of Bigfoot where little ones have been involved. I've even heard one very close to where I live, where people with some large chicken farms were throwing carcasses out in the back of their buildings, and when they did that, the Bigfoot would come, and several of them usually, and scoop up all the carcasses they could and carry them away. And one time, one of them was evidently a mother with an infant one, and she set it down in the snow, picked up the chicken carcasses, and then picked up the baby again and ran off. And they said when they went out there, they could still see the imprint of its little rump in the snow. And this is a woman who will not let me use, her name or location.
Right.
She's a medical professional, put it that way, and does not want it known because she doesn't want people coming. She doesn't have any reason to, prank me with something like that. And also, it's corroborated by so many other stories of observations people have made of this sort of thing. And I've also had people report to me seeing an upright canine crossing a road with 3 little ones, or having one little one with it, a pup of some sort. So it seems that if they are, as these Native American culture stories say, mostly spirit animals, that they're naturally from this other world, and this is the place where they can breed and reproduce and make more of themselves, that would be a really valuable thing to them, I would think. And they would want to have their own territory so they could keep the young ones safe. It all makes sense.
Right, and by killing somebody, if they actually attacked somebody, that would, if they're smart enough to know, they would bring more attention, that they don't want.
Exactly. And some people have even talked about seeing some that helped them or were at least very neutral to them in surprising ways. So it's not, when I hear and see representations of them as being these just slobbering, blood-spattering, hugely muscled things, it's either something different. I have one good friend who calls them fatheads as a nickname, sort of, because they're just more mindless and more vicious, much more dangerous. And there aren't many of them, but they're very different, again, from the other ones. So, and I think you can look at there's been a pretty big aggregate of reports now, especially for a long time I really felt like the Lone Ranger, especially the first 10 years. I worked at the newspaper before I wrote books or anything, and was just kind of tucking away all the correspondence people would send and trying to go investigate where I could. But I was not getting any love from the Bigfoot community or many other cryptozoologists, because they just didn't think that it was possible for there to be, one more unknown creature. But once the Internet and TV kind of opened the subject up, I think that the number of reports, other people are taking reports, which is great, and there are lots more of them. So we have a much bigger aggregate of information to look at and generalize their behavior by.
Well, I'd say the Bigfoot community has got a divide in it, too, between those who believe it's just a physical creature we haven't been able to identify, and those who believe that something along the lines that we're talking, like a spirit animal or something from another dimension.
Right. Yeah, it's basically the same argument with, I think both the creatures have that same line that people try to draw between them, and I'm not sure that you can really draw a line, or that they why couldn't they be the same creature that exists on a sliding scale of energy, the same way that sound exists on a sliding scale. We don't either hear just almost nothing or huge noise at the same time. We have a sliding scale. Things get louder, things get softer. Color, light. Everything isn't just white totally or black totally. Imagine if the whole world looked like 1950s TV screens. Only they were at least shades of gray. But if everything was black or white, it would be a very, very different world. And we don't. We have it. Light is a sliding scale. So to me, perhaps there's a way that life forms and their solidity can also be a sliding scale that we just can't really observe yet. In the same way we can't hear dog whistles, but we know they're there, and our dogs know they're there.
Well, I had Dr. Barry Taff on a couple weeks ago, and we got into the subject of psychokinetic energy coming from people, or is there some other entities involved that are almost parasitic the way that they feed off of people. There's what we're getting at is there's a whole other realm that we can't see interacting with us in so many different ways. And like you said, a sliding scale, you have to wonder there could be a whole plethora of other life that exists in a different way than carbon-based life exists here, in a dimension, just like you said, like the Upside Down in Stranger Things, that's right next to us, that are slipping in. That's something I've always felt is a huge possibility. I mean, we don't have a Bigfoot body. We don't have a Dogman body, as far as I know. I mean, it would explain a lot of that away, if these things don't totally exist in our reality.
Yeah, that's really, really true. And, so many researchers, one thing, I'm getting to the point in my life where I have to start thinking, well, how long am I going to do this? How much more do I have to say? And I've been kind of looking at different researchers to see what they've come up with, because sooner or later, after so many books on the topic, you start feeling what could be real and what isn't. And I just took a handful of books off of my bookshelf just to kind of mine them for whatever these people are saying. And some of them are still quite active, and I guess I would call myself quite active too, but I may not be forever. But just this handful I took, barely even taking time to see what they were. One is Unexplained by Richard McLean Smith. That's the one I'm reading right now. Biocentrism by Robert Lanza, MD, is another one. I just happen to have the pile by my desk, just happened to. Quantum Bigfoot by Ron Moorhead is another good book I recommend. One very underestimated author who sadly has passed away a couple years ago, Rob Riggs, In the Big Thicket, On the Trail of the Wild Man, covers everything we've just been saying in a very beautifully written and very powerful way. Again, that's Rob Riggs, In the Big Thicket, On the Trail of the Wild Man, if you can find it. The Haunted Universe by D. Scott Rogo. Then there's the, Michael Talbot is pretty well known, and he has The Holographic Universe.
Yes. I have that book.
Yeah, that's very, very, very great one. Then there are some that the old standards, if you can find these anywhere. Two of my favorites are Space-Time Transient and Unusual Events by these two scientists, Michael A. Persinger and Ghislaine F. Lafreniere. I hope I said that right.
Better than I would try.
And it's an older book, but it goes through the logistics for everything we just discussed, and science has increased greatly in this area since this book was written, but it's still very powerful in its intimations for multi-world creatures, to put it simply.
Right.
And it has chapters like large-scale solar geophysical electromagnetic phenomena as contributory factors to unusual events, and by unusual events they usually mean large numbers of monster reports.
Well, with the Dogman, like for let's take Bray Road. What are some common between Bray Road and places like in Michigan and other places you've gotten these reports of Dogman? What are some of the commonalities between these places? Like you said water for one. I mean, what are these commonalities? These places.
Water's a big one. That was one of the first ones that I noticed. And I have a chapter in my new book, I Know What I Saw, about this very topic, about the commonalities between, no matter the country or place or time, that these all seem to bear up. One is any sort of sacred area, or like a cemetery, graveyard,
right.
A place where there used to be dolmens or, sacred rocks. Churches, sites of churches, all of those seem to be magnets attracting these kinds of creatures. And oftentimes, when they're at these places, that's where you may see some of the strange phenomena, where they may seem to be fading in or out a little, or they might shapeshift or do other things that the other animals do not. Another one would be military installations. This is something that's been coming to my attention too. And when you think about it, it actually meshes pretty well with the mound, sacred mound type of places, because military sites and religious sites both usually want to be on the very highest ground for different reasons. But oftentimes there would be a multi-use of a mound or a natural mountain type of area for both of these purposes. So you have those, and the military installation, some people liken that to scientific labs that are experimenting. They figure the military would be in the forefront of creating strange creatures. And in this day and age, that's really, it's possible. You know, it's no longer science fiction. We can find any gene, and not only that, flip it on or off and splice it with other animals or put it in another position in the body. So
growing ears off the backs of mice. You know,
exactly.
That's creepy.
That's been done. Taking fluorescent little sea animals and making glowing creatures from them. You know, we're even talking about, and I covered this in my book too, it sounds ghastly, but it has directly to do very possibly with one strange sighting. Certain scientists have been claiming they can do, and sort of hinting that they have done, at least with animals, head transplants onto different bodies.
Right.
So that somebody whose body has a bad problem, if you save the head, they can put it on a nice, fresh, new, young one.
Well, there's a Russian doctor, I believe, that's been trying to put this together, and he's trying to find the right country that'll allow him to do it, to do a transplant, and the right patient to do a transplant like that.
Right, and I think I quoted him in this new book, actually, and he was saying, as of the date in 2017, that was the last chance for me to get that in the book as a certain date. It hadn't been done yet.
Right.
Well, it's always officially hasn't been done.
Yeah.
Because I've said this many times too. My personal belief is that if there is something that can be done, that humans have the knowledge, have acquired how to do it, and have the materials, somebody's going to do it. Because we don't all have the same ethics. Some people think in other places may think that's perfectly fine, or they want the military edge or whatever to do that. And so it would surprise me if this hasn't happened already. But anyway, I'm kind of getting off the topic of your question, which is where these features
commonalities.
Commonalities. So you have the military installations, and I have some surprising things in my book about that too. It was especially strong in German World War II military installations. And even if a creature hadn't been seen, there very often was a werewolf legend to go with the site, which surprised me. And I got some inside information on that. So there's that, and then trying to think. Usually, it's a little different. Bigfoots also very much like to congregate in places where there are sharp inclines, so that they can dive down behind things and get out of sight easily. And perhaps there are other reasons too, but that's the main advantage I see. It's not the only place they can be, but it seems to be one of their very preferred habitats. Whereas the dogmen appear to like deciduous forests and flat prairies where they can chase after deer easily, and things are sticking up out of the corn. And in fact, early on, one of my favorite things to do when I get reports, I like to kind of go to a map, and both GPS and I really love the old style atlases where you can just lay it out on the table and look at the thing at once, because you can start to see differences. You put a few pins in, and you can say, oh yeah, this is the prairie, and then this is a place with ravines and rises and things, and then you can see that on that side will be the Bigfoot sightings, on the other side will be mostly the dogmen. And there's a state forest right in southeastern Wisconsin where that thing has shown up really strongly. So, it's the type of geography. I think they like the same type of prey, turkeys, deer, that sort of thing. So they perhaps compete for the same food.
I picture a dogman and a Bigfoot fighting. You wonder, do they interact? Is there any witnesses to a dogman Bigfoot encounter? That would be the mind blowing cryptozoology
event
witness.
of the century. Yeah. And I have heard of a couple, nothing I could personally verify.
Right.
Sometimes it's just on it's a humorous thing of, who could take the other one, who would win in a equal weight fight, the dog man or the Bigfoot. So, and that's people just having fun. And I don't mind at all people having fun with the topic. I'm still kind of, a cartoonist, and I've drawn sort of humorous. Sometimes I'll draw a humorous Christmas card featuring the dog man.
Right.
And if you go to lindagodfrey.com, my blog, you'll find a couple of those on there. So I can't say personally that it's a terrible thing. I do think there's a point where if it gets too disrespectful, I feel bad about that because
there's real people that have seen this. They don't want to be made fun of.
Exactly. You don't want to make fun of the witnesses. And something in me makes me not want to really make fun of these creatures in any way either, because they seem to me that, again, I don't know what kind of beings they are, but I feel they are real entities of some sort. They're an actual phenomenon that is important and finds earthly meetings with humans, not meetings as we think of them, of course, but they also, that's another thing, because that's another thing that so many witnesses say, is they were surprised. They felt the creature was as interested in them as they were in it, as if they were being observed. And that denotes to me a purposeful intelligence, that you never want to just treat that like a joke.
Right. Well, like I said, we haven't heard of anybody being killed, as far as we know, by a dogman or being attacked. It seems like it always scares them away. That, to me, that requires intelligence. That requires some kind of thought, like, I'm not just some brutal beast that's just going to kill somebody that invades its territory. It wants people out, but it doesn't want to direct too much attention. If you kill somebody, the townspeople come with the pitchforks, and it requires some kind of intelligence. That's just what I get from the encounters I've read in your book. And one of the things on the Travel Channel too, I remember, is that special is you had a map that you put up of, like, all the sightings between Wisconsin and Michigan, and then you put up another map over it of was it burial mounds or?
Yeah, that was something that occurred to me. I was working on my second book on the werewolf phenomenon, and if you'll excuse me a second, I just realized I have to just take a sip of water real quick. Be right with you.
Oh, that's fine. We're actually going to go to commercial break, so if you want to get rehydrated there, we'll go to commercial break, actually. It's just that time now, actually. So, guys, we're going to go to commercial break. When we come back, we will open up the phone lines, too. I'll give those out when we come back from the commercial break. But check us out on, if you're listening on Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, our YouTube channel, Paranormal Soup, Jason Bland. We got the Super Chat on there. You can help donate to the show, get your question to us through that. Jamie and Rob are looking for those questions. But we will be back after this short commercial break.
Transmission of unknown origin.
Transmission? Out here?
SOS.
Human.
Unknown.
Alien. Certificate X. Exclusive engagement at the Odeon Leicester Square. Now.
Any systematized transmission indicating a possible intelligent origin must be investigated.
I don't want to hear it.
In space, no one can hear you scream.
Paranation Magazine is a new paranormal magazine based out of Denver, Colorado. Our goal isn't just to give you the best paranormal content out there, but to promote paranormal unity. We're doing this by giving everyone an opportunity to tell their stories and to share their experiences. For more information, follow us on Facebook at Paranation Magazine, and soon, paranationmag.com.
Knights of the Road, here's your stallion. The car for freedom. The car for hot excitement. The car for a man who is alone against the elements.
The Waibatsu Thunder.
The pride is back. It's the power of a compact.
Looks small, but it's so big.
Fuel injected.
Inject me.
My Batsu Thunder. On the toll road of life, you have to pay to prove you can. Live the emotion of an individual.
Thunder.
The awesome power of nature distilled into one vehicle. Because after you get struck by lightning, there's thunder.
The Waibatsu Thunder.
When Alex Gardner is asleep, he has an extraordinary gift. The government wants it, the scientists want it, but to keep it may cost him his life. It might be better if Alex didn't sleep at all, but he cannot resist entering the dreamscape. Can you? See Dreamscape in the West End and all over London now. Certificate 15. It takes an extraordinary adventurer to enter the Dreamscape.
This is an APAC studio presentation.
Hey kids, tired of running away from home, then getting lost and wrapping your big wheel around a cow, then having no one to turn to other than that weirdo in the van with the dark tinted windows? Or his friend, your creepy Uncle John? Well, worry no more with new OnStar for Kids. Now you can run away in style with an OnStar for Kids kit installed in your big wheel, tricycle, or cute little smart car. Yes, just in time for Christmas, OnStar for Kids. So the next time you're on your way to Granny's house, or Weekend Dad's pathetic little bachelor pad, and you run over a homeless person in your toboggan, OnStar for Kids will clean up the mess, hide the hobo body, and get you there in time for nappies.
This is OnStar. Do you need someone to kiss your boo-boo?
This has been a presentation from Tim Morgan's APAC Studio. For more almost professional amateur comic studio content, visit the APAC YouTube channel. Search APAC 2002. That's APAC 2002 on YouTube.
Edgar Allan Poe wrote Spirits of the Dead with a pen dipped in warm blood. You will see the ultimate in terror with this important all-star cast. Brigitte Bardot, Alain Delon, Jane Fonda, Terence Stamp, and Peter Fonda in Edgar Allan Poe's Spirits of the Dead. Only Poe's demented genius could bring to the screen such horror and evil. Spirits of the Dead stars Brigitte Bardot, Alain Delon, Jane Fonda, Terence Stamp, and Peter Fonda. Directed by three masters of the cinema, Federico Fellini, Louis Malle, and Roger Vadim. Spirits of the Dead is an adventure in terror beyond your wildest nightmares. Spirits of the Dead in color is rated R.
House at 8%. So they're okay. So, does anybody want to play Parcheesi? Okay, who brought the dog?
Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guest is Linda Godfrey. We've been talking a lot about Dogman. We've got more we're going to want to talk about her tonight on that. So like I said, I've always wanted to do a show on Dogman, and what a better guest than Linda Godfrey. And man, we're getting some great information tonight. But if you've had an experience with a cryptozoological creature, be it Dogman, Bigfoot, or anything like that, call in tonight. Tell us your story. 219-230-4444. That's 219-230-4444. You can also call in on Skype ID OOJBlandOO, or that's OOJBLANDOO. Call in. You'll hear us talk, and just wait till we call upon you, and then talk to us. If you have a question, too, you just want to call in and ask a question of Linda, please call in tonight. The lines are open. But let's go ahead and get back to our guest. You still there with me, Linda?
I'm here, thanks. All set to go. Did you want me to finish answering that question?
Yeah, go ahead. We have somebody waiting on the phone line, but I want to get back to that, actually.
Okay, sure. Well, you had asked me about the comparison, looking at the map of Wisconsin. And what I actually had been doing that one day was finding spots where a particular type of ancient animal effigy mound was found. Now, these happen to be a very ancient sort of sacred mound. They're not real high mounds. They're maybe 2 or 3 feet off the ground and usually flat on top, but they represent different animals. If you looked at them from
Right.
a parachute or an airplane or a drone or whatever and looked down, you could clearly see them. And some were like 150 feet across. And they'd be great birds, bears, what have you. But there was one that was very mysterious. It was called the water spirit or the water panther.
Ooh.
It's this very, very long tail that looked very panther-like. And I was noting where all of the main sighting clusters had been in the state, not individual places, but where there'd been, a noted amount of sightings in contemporary times. And I was thinking, wow, this looks familiar to me. And I realized I had just purchased a new book about these ancient effigy mounds, and they had a page where they listed all the sightings in the main clusters, again, of these particular water spirit creatures. And they were almost identical, almost exactly the same. And I put them on transparencies, and I've shown them when I've given talks or appearances, and lay one down and the other on top of the other. And the audience always just gasped.
Right. I did when I saw it on the show. I was like, wow, that's lines right up.
They do. They really, really did. It was just absolutely amazing. The best part of it was that I'd been trying for a long time to get an interview with an elder at our area Ho-Chunk tribe. And that's a culture that has been in Wisconsin for a long time. And they actually say that many of those mounds were there before their own people arrived in that spot. And,
Really?
And they're still busy trying to learn what all of them are, too. And so I'd been turned down time after time for an interview. Well, I called up their tribal chairman after I discovered this and described what I saw. And I had a really great interview, like by 3 days.
Yeah.
I was down there and had a really wonderful talk with this woman who was the elder and the anthropologist. And she said they're extremely interested in the same thing and trying to figure out these very ancient connections themselves.
So they're not even sure who built the mounds. They don't know what a Native American tribe did?
Not positively. They do
Right.
think it was probably ancestors of the Ho-Chunk and maybe one other tribe that was around at that time. But, the ancient people moved around every now and then. They'd have trade places with different people or leave a place and find their old place filled in with someone else. So they moved around, and you can't always say it was the same people that were on the same spot forever. So, but they do think in their latest findings are that many of these effigy mound shapes are very much associated with the totem people that are represented in that tribe. So they're thinking it probably was somebody, at least some of them were ancestors of the present-day Ho-Chunk.
And you say totem, I mean, so it's like, an effigy, so they symbolically put things up of other spirit animals as representations of these areas, of the mounds, or?
Well, they didn't really have the totem poles,
Right.
like the northern Indians of the U.S. and Canada did, but they would represent them by carving pipes or whatever, and they were the typical. There was like the Wolf Clan and the Bear Clan and the Snake Clan, and the Eagle Clan is a popular one. I have met several people these days who claim they've been in the Eagle Clan in their family for many years, and all of these normal animals. But then you come to some that are a little bit different, like this water spirit.
Right.
Was very, very interesting. It looks sort of like a panther, but not exactly. and I had some hints that it was, in its culture story, said to be sometimes on 2 feet, which I thought was very, very interesting.
Right. That's why I was wondering if there's like a connection to that tribal, Native Americans they witnessed this dogman in their ancient past and put it down in some form of story or, description.
Yeah, and it's not really very frequent, but you can find some art representations, and I think that it was in Monsters Among Us where I did find some newly discovered, I think they were called the Atherton Caves. I'd have to look in that book and see which one, but there were cave drawings of what definitely looked like canines upright, and also wearing some costumes too.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
I want to get to this phone call here, too. They've been waiting. We got area code 405. Who do we got on the phone line?
Hey, Jason, it's Tyler. I've been having anxiety like crazy with her talking about this creature.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd call in because you told me a little bit about this experience you had. So if you want to go ahead and tell her about it, I'd love to hear it all.
Yeah, I grew up in Janesville, Wisconsin all my life, up until I was about 21 years old. And my aunt actually lived in Evansville, Wisconsin, too. And, I always had this weird feeling about these 2 grave sites that are in that town. And one is an old Baptist, and I used to date this girl, and her house was in front of and her backyard was the old Baptist cemetery. And there was a day that we were driving into town really late at night, and I'm just looking out on her side because she's driving, and out of nowhere this thing is running at us, and it has long hair, and it's pretty long. And it was on all fours running, and with yellow eyes, and I was bracing for impact, and I didn't hear nothing.
They just ran right at the car.
Pulled off the side of the road, and I mean, I've hit roadkill before and looked in my rearview mirror and seen it flying before, but I didn't see nothing. I didn't hear no thud, nothing, and I screamed. She screamed. Pulled off their side of the road, and there was nothing there.
Where exactly were you? I know these towns pretty well.
Right.
Pretty well, I have to say.
Highway 14.
Mhm. So you were heading towards.
And it's actually, I think it's on its way to Elkhorn too.
Oh, okay. Yep, that would be a very high unknown canine area.
And there's there's another thing that's interesting about the certain areas that you're talking about. There's a lot of death, a lot of car accidents. Like they'll even some of the articles will say possibly using cell phone or something, because you can see the tire marks. They swerve off the road a little bit, like. Maybe that was the last thing they seen, and I don't know. Unfortunately, I've always wondered about that, especially these 4 kids that died in a car accident.
Oh yeah, there've been lots. Highway 14 is cited in so many accidents. There was an article about it in the Janesville Gazette just Sunday, I think. Can you repeat exactly what you managed to see? I know you didn't get a great look at the whole thing, but what did you see of the creature exactly?
It looked like a wolf. It looked like what you were talking about, and it had long hair, and just this. And I even looked dead in its eyes as it was coming at us, and it looked like, and when you were talking about some people, they can see something in, I seen darkness. I seen nothing but darkness in its eyes.
Was it on all fours, or was it on its hind legs?
Yes, it was on 14. It was like
no, she meant was it running or was it on 4
when you're
legs?
Coming,
Tyler, she meant
was
it
on
running
4 legs running.
Right.
Oh, okay. And how large would you say it was? So where did its shoulders come up to?
I mean, she drove a half-size truck. She drove a Ford Ranger, and it was up to the lights.
That's pretty big.
Yeah, that's
when it was running. But it was long. It was a long creature. I mean, it looked like it was bigger than a dog. Like there should have been a thud. There should have been something there. There's no way that it maneuvered to turn the other way. We would have heard something hit.
Well, bigger than a dog, would you say it would be like a calf or a small
like a
pony?
mountain lion you're talking about? Like the size of a mountain lion?
Mountain lions, mountain lions can be about the same weight as dogs, but
right.
There is something that I have in my new book that these things have been reported to me, and they have especially been reported in the area where you're talking about. I gave them sort of a new category of their own and a new name because I finally had such a pile of them. They didn't seem like the other regular ones. These, for a long time, I was calling them quads, short for quadrupeds, because one thing that distinguished them was they weren't seen running on their hind legs, but they're very prone to chasing and attacking automobiles while they're running, and very often they'll trying to bump it off the road with their, and I have at least one report where you were able to, but I haven't published it, where they bumped it off the road and almost turned over in the ditch. And they're usually described just about as you said. The shoulder comes up to about where the driver's window starts, which is huge, and they'll say, well, it was either like a bull calf or a miniature
What's that?
pony.
Sorry.
Like a bull calf, like the size of a bull calf.
Bull calf, or a large calf.
Yeah, I would say I'll say about as tall, but the body of it was longer, But when it was running on all fours, it was bigger than definitely a Great Dane, way bigger than that dog. I mean, I can't explain. I mean, it was such a split second in the corner of my eye. This thing running, and I mean, it was glowing too. I mean, maybe it was the headlights glowing on it, but I mean, it was glowing. I mean, we both seen it. And I even messaged her just a little bit ago. I was like, hey, I'm going to talk about this on this show tonight. She's like, I'm like, what highway was that again? 14, right? And it's the highway that goes in, is coming from Janesville, from the Rock County Jail.
Right. It goes all the way to Evansville on one side, or you can go the other direction and go all the way to Delavan on it. And there have been lots accidents, and I've had many. Maybe if I let you know the new name, which I just came up with really for this book because I was pondering what to call them, and I finally came up with the term of dire dogs, not dire wolves, because they're not all wolf-looking. Like if you see wolves, you pretty much know it's a wolf.
Right.
These animals are often long-snouted, but sometimes they've got more like a boxer snout, or the ears aren't quite the same. They don't have the pointy ears.
Yep, and it did have a long snout, too. I mean, it was looked like it would hurt if it...
Did it have the pointy ears, Tyler?
Yep, it had pointy ears. I mean, it looked like a werewolf costume, if that makes sense. Like, I've seen werewolf costumes. I mean, they're gray, white hair. Looks like someone that's just about to be gray-haired, that has long hair. That's a rock star or something. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I call them dire dogs because they're actually bigger than the dire wolves were.
That's crazy.
We have lots and lots of fossil evidence of what the dire wolves were, and the dire part comes in from the fact that they do have, also in many cases, people will report there's like bristles or a ruff on the back of their neck, and that they have like a bigger jaw area is sometimes, not in every case, but in many cases is reported. So they remind me of these dire wolves, but they're a little bigger, and they sometimes have dog characteristics. But they've been reported to me just since really for 27 years, since the very beginning of reports. I had one that was just out around that Whitewater area is another place where several of them have been seen. But they're really attracted to cars, just like the, just kind of the jokey old farm dog following the cars. Don't just follow them. In some cases they do, and usually if they're running with them or behind them, they're just keeping up as long as they feel like it, and then they sort of, just as in the other types of sightings, they veer off out of sight. But if you saw one of these dead, they're not human at all. You would just think that's a really weird-looking dead animal. And in fact, one was reported to me that two men saw covering a road between LaGrange and Whitewater, and they stopped because there was just this huge carcass, and it stretched almost all the way across this asphalt road. It was that big.
Wow.
And they didn't know what it was because it was so large, but they thought it was just some weird kind of dog, and they left. They were very uncomfortable seeing it. They didn't want to get blamed for it, and they thought about it later and came back, and it was gone. So either it recovered and ran off, or somebody took it. But in many cases where people have shot point blank at these animals, or they've been hit really hard by something, they act stunned for a moment, but then they get up and run away.
Right.
It's very hard to have any sort of a deadly wound on one.
Well, thank you, Tyler, for calling in. It's a great,
no
great
problem,
story.
man. I'm so glad I can finally talk about that experience, because like she was talking about, like, not many people had the drive or are scared to talk about stuff like that because, people think you could be possibly crazy, but it's nice to know. I mean, I tried researching this a few years ago, and there was a couple articles about it, but I noticed they're not on the internet anymore. So I was wondering what happened to them, and then, I'm just recounting that experience all the time because, I mean, that almost took my life.
Yeah, that's very scary. They're nothing to fool with, and I do have a whole chapter on them. Lots of different sorts of encounters with them. One was even in a park in Milwaukee. But if you go to lindagodfrey.com and then on the About page scroll down a bit, and there's a box where you can write to me if you want to give me your information. I can talk to you more about it.
Okay.
You should, Tyler. Yeah.
I'll totally be down for that because I could add a whole lot more to it because I am entwined with the spiritual world, and man, I was having some wicked dreams all the way up until that experience. So, but thank you for letting me call in tonight. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too. Yeah, and just go to lindagodfrey.com. There's no W's, and go to the About page and scroll down to the box where you can send me. Anybody can send a report or something like that there, but I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, Tyler, you should write it out and send it to her because right before the show, Linda was telling me about this dire dog that she's got in her coming up in her new book, and I'm thinking this does sound like what Tyler's talked about. He's going to call in. I'm like, I hope he calls in. So thank you.
Classic. I would have to say classic example.
No kidding. All right, have a good night, Tyler.
And I just thought, man, now we can tell. I just made the show awesome, just recounting my story, and then it's her story is absolutely true now. You know what I'm saying?
Well, thank you, bud.
So I'm not the only one. Thank you.
So you trust me, you are not the only one.
No kidding. All right, have a good night, Tyler.
Good night.
Yeah, he was telling me about this story just yesterday, I think it was, and I'm like, well, it's not totally Dogman. And then you're telling me about this before the show. I'm like, God, this sounds like Tyler. So I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. I just hope he calls in because it just sounds exactly like what you were talking about before the show about the dire dog. And,
and I haven't printed that, so, he hasn't seen that or read it anymore,
right.
Which is impressive.
Like he said, he tried to look for information on it, and he couldn't find much. Of course, I'm sure these kind of experiences get overshadowed by, Dogman stories.
They do, and there's so many more of the Dogman stories, and like I said, I was just keeping the separate folder where some of them. I did put a few of them where they were sort of ambiguous in the other books. So there have been some, and also on my website, I do post stories there that people tell me often that aren't published anywhere else. But I finally just realized it seemed like there were more and more of them, and my folder had gotten pretty thick, and I couldn't even use them all in the book, because unfortunately publishers limit me to the number of pages that I can write. But there's a really good representative sample there, and I hope to put more of them in the blog. It's my poor blog suffers whenever I've got a new book coming out because the publisher keeps me so busy helping with publicity things, and I don't get my normal blog posts. So I do plan to make up for that very soon, though. And in the meantime, you can. I think people will be surprised at the ones in the book, and will recognize this in some other encounters. That
what I find really interesting about Tyler's story too, his experience, is the fact that this thing ran at the car, and he expected it to hit the car, and then nothing was there.
Exactly. That's why I say it's a classic dire dog story, and he would have had no way of knowing things like that, no way of knowing about even the way he described it as it's coming up to the headlights on that vehicle. That's how people describe it, and the size that it was, everything just fit, and they don't fit the usual MO of what we call the dog man or the wolf man or the man wolf or the unknown upright canine. They're sort of in a different place.
And has, in these stories of the dire dog, has it caused car accidents? They went off the side of the road. You said somebody went into a ditch. It sounds like this could be one of the dangerous ones because of what it could do if you're driving down the road and you see this thing come right at you like they did.
Yeah, I had another one. I think it was from northern Wisconsin or northern Minnesota. I can't remember which one it was. And this was a little earlier on, where a father and I think one kid were driving in a terrible snowstorm, and they saw this thing coming behind them, first in the rearview mirror, and then it was up almost even with their car. And
that means it's fast, probably.
Very fast, but it was making them slide on the ice and
the
snow. Yeah, so they're nothing to fool around with. I wouldn't stop the car to take a photo if I were anybody. It seems that if you just go a little ways and keep proceeding, it'll veer off eventually. But it's like it has its go at whoever's there at the time, and then it's done.
It's again territorial, it seems like, scaring people off.
Right, exactly. It's interesting, too, because where he was talking about Highway 14 going over by Evansville, Wisconsin, there's a place called Weary Road, just outside of Evansville, that's been known as a local spook road for many, many, many decades. And, where the teenagers go out and hope to see things. And it wasn't necessarily known as a place where you'd see something like a werewolf, but more like ghosts and different stuff. And it's been written up in many of the books about Wisconsin spooky things. It's pretty well known.
I've heard of it, actually.
Yeah. W-E-A-R-Y, just like if you're weary.
Yeah.
And it is much spookier than Bray Road. It's got this kind of crazy old ditch system, and you go over this little road, and there are trees that meet above the road, kind of like an archway. In the dark, it's very frightening. And that's very close to where he was describing.
It makes you wonder. England has its black shuck and the hellhounds. I've always been interested in hellhounds. I have like a fascination with the story behind hellhounds, but they're like a supernatural dog-like creature that appears and disappears like the dogman or like your dire dog. When you talk about in the book, American Monsters, you mentioned a little bit ago about them being almost like bulletproof. People have fired guns at these things to no effect. This thing ran right at the car. It seemed like it either went through it or disappeared. It again relates to the idea that these things aren't totally in our physical reality.
Right. One of my favorite stories was in one of the southern states. I can't recall which at the moment, but there was a man who was out in what they call flatboat fishing in the shallows for catfish, big old lunker catfish.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was out there in this flatboat, not terribly far from shore, and he did have an automatic weapon with him. But his dog started kind of howling and whining, and he looked, and up on the shore there was a canine-like creature, or wolf-like creature, standing there on its hind legs, watching him and watching the dog. And the dog and the creature seemed to sort of bear some animosity toward one another, and it began to wade out into the water, and the man was very afraid for his dog, was afraid the thing would come and kill his dog, so he pretty much emptied a clip into it, and it just kind of looked at itself and turned around and went back into the woods. And they tried to follow it, and there were maybe a couple traces of blood and then nothing.
Been interesting to get those blood samples, you know. But,
yeah, exactly. That would be really good to know. But I mean, here's this man. He doesn't know about these creatures. He's just sitting out there catfishing with his dog like he always does, and then there's this thing that looks like a wolf on its hind leg wanting to go after his dog. And that is another thing that is reported fairly often. If dogs are coming out to chase them, very often the dog will not come back.
So there's dogs that have gone missing?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Really?
And even in front of the owner.
And they don't find the carcass or anything. The dog goes missing.
Goes missing, or sometimes they do find a carcass. But
man.
Yeah, one had an incident where their dog ran off into the woods at night because it had heard this howling in the woods, and it went after it. And I'm pretty sure that the people had a glimpse of it. They knew it looked like a wolf type of thing. And then the next day when it was light out, and more safe, he went to look and found just kind of shreds and tatters of his dog's...
oh, my God.
What's left of his dog, yeah. There's another one that is almost comical. It happened to two women who were living just south of the Wisconsin-Illinois border, kind of in the center of the state. For some reason, that whole center line area all the way across is fairly much a hot spot for both dogmen and Bigfoot sightings. But anyway, they had heard a noise. They had let their cat out to have some time outdoors, and they heard their cat yowling. And they went into their kitchen where they had a patio screen door and looked out and flipped on the light, and there standing in the shadowy light was this very tall dog man. They didn't know it was a dog man, but they said it was a canine or a wolf or something, standing on its hind legs with their cat in its mouth.
Wow.
And the light surprised him so much that he dropped the cat. The cat lived. It had a few puncture marks. But
really?
But
9 lives for the cat, right? Survive a dogman attack. We got another phone call on the line. We got 807 area code. Who do we get on the line?
It's Laura Lee. Hi, Jason. How are you?
Hey, Laura Lee. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, Laura Lee.
I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Oh,
yeah,
hi. Hi. How are you, Linda?
Hi.
I'm great, thanks.
I have to... actually, I'm calling from Canada, but I live about 35 minutes away from the Minnesota border. I'm in Thunder Bay. And I don't think I've even shared this story with Jason, but somebody that's in the chat room, we were talking one night, and I happened to go out. I actually live in quite a haunted, paranormal type house, but I happened to go outside. Believe it or not, I was with two women chatting, talking about a new hair color, and I said, oh, the color's just in the garbage outside. I'll grab the box. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and right across the street from me, it was probably about 15 feet from where I was standing, there was this giant silver-colored wolf, probably, 12 feet high, long, probably a good 6 feet at the shoulder. It turned and looked at me. Its eyes seemed like they were blue, and I remember the person I was on the phone with, I turned the phone to the camera because we were on video chat, and I said, can you see this? And he kept saying, no, I don't know what you're talking about. But they could hear it growling. I could not hear it. They kept saying to me, get back in that house. And I watched it because I didn't feel any fear, and it literally disappeared when it went by a telephone pole. It walked right by me, and the really weird part was my son was still awake, my oldest son, and when he heard me come back in, he yelled at me and said, Mom, what the heck was going on out there? All I could hear was growling in the house. I don't know if you've ever heard of any animal like this before or not.
Well, the large size, yeah, I have. The large size right away made me think something paranormal. There are what people call shadow
Well, I will
wolves,
tell
and
you.
they're not.
What?
Pardon? I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. Go ahead. I have a bit of a delay. Go ahead, because I was just going to say my husband has been seeing really large solo black wolves on our security camera.
That's
really big,
wow.
like red eyes.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
yes, the red eyes and the huge size usually means there's some sort of a paranormal apparition of some type or otherworldly being, something that's not quite all of this world. And I don't know why they have the huge size, but it's very, very common. I've had reports like this in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, across from a Native American reserve. I've had other ones. Just really, they're fairly widespread. They're usually out by woods. You don't usually see these giant blue-eyed or red-eyed white or black ones in a city. They're usually out in some sort of rural area. There was one that was on that visited a farm family right on their farm in the daylight in one of the southern states, and the whole family, they were out doing chores and that kind of thing. And all of a sudden, they all looked at one garden, and this huge black, shadowy, wolf-like creature was standing there. And when it turned and looked at them, they all said, and I interviewed several members of the family, and they all said the same thing. It looked like it was two-dimensional. It was like if you had a cardboard cutout and then turned it sideways towards you. So you just saw the cutout thing, and it ran. The grandma. I mean, it's a classic story. But the grandmother came running out of the house. She had like a mop or something on a handle, and it must have startled it. Quickly disappeared back into the woods. But
don't mess with Grandma.
Here's something else here in southeastern Wisconsin, we have the Kettle Moraine State Forest, where I do a lot of my field work because I kind of know where things happen there. And I've had 3 different people within the past year who didn't know anything about this describe almost exactly what your husband saw in a certain area just north of the park. And none of them knew about the other ones. And I really haven't published this too much because it's still an investigatory work in progress. But it sounds exactly like what you're seeing. I've also got, if you go to lindagodfrey.com, and my stories and posts are listed, and there's one about the roof. I can't remember how I phrased it, the roof jumper or something like this, where a man heard something on his roof and went out and looked up, and there was a blue-eyed, huge wolf sitting there looking down at him.
On his roof?
On the roof of his house,
Oh, man.
Yeah, I did even a sketch to kind of show how it was, and you might be interested in that. So, and then there's another one where a woman had a dogman sighting in her backyard, and this was in a city limits with backyards that went up to one another. But luckily, there were a lot of porch lights, and she saw it was 6 feet tall. I know because I went there, measured the area between the ground and where its head passed under a certain branch, and that was 6 feet, covered with gray fur, walked across the back line of her lot and kind of disappeared into the night. And she had also earlier been visited by a huge white wolf-like creature with blue eyes that came to her patio door while she was in there having a hot tub.
She's in her hot tub, and this thing walks up to her patio door?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's not good.
But see, and these associations, when you hear one story, 2 stories, it doesn't seem like much, but you start putting them all together.
Right.
And you see there's a correlation among these things, and it gets really fascinating for me and probably terrifying for anyone who has seen one of these things, because then it almost seems purposeful, and you want to know what's up with it, right?
Right. Like, is there a purpose?
I hear you, Linda, because I wasn't afraid. Oh, sorry, Jason.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because, Linda, I wasn't afraid when I was outside. The friend I was talking to was saying, get back in the house, because she couldn't see it. And I said, well, why? There's nothing. And she said, don't argue, just get in the house. And then when I went inside, she said, you couldn't hear that growling, because I had no fear. And the thing is, where we live, it's not rural, but we're close to the highway, and there's a park right next, like literally across the street. that has a lot of forest, a lot of deer, a lot of things like that. So thank you for taking my phone call, and I'm glad I don't feel so weird now because I was the only one that saw it.
Oh, you're
but
not.
2 people heard it.
Thank you very much for calling it in. And again, as I told the last caller, if you go to lindagodfrey.com, and then there's an About page where you can find a call or a write-in box where you can write anything to me. And if you'd like to drop me a note about that, that would be great.
You totally should, Laura Lee.
I would. Thank you very much for taking my call. Great show tonight, as always, and you're a great guest, Linda. Thank you.
Hey, Laura Lee, really quick. You said Dell was getting these creatures on, or he got these black wolves on security camera?
Yeah.
Does he have footage of that?
Yeah, but remember, ever since No, because remember I told you, ever since the Paranormal Activity started, our cameras won't record.
Oh, that's right.
That's why some of the pictures I've had to take of the monitor, and he's familiar with wolves because he used to work out in the bush, so he even knows what timber wolves look like.
Right.
And he said this thing was even bigger than a timber wolf.
Oh, man. If you could have got
I'll
that
tell him
footage,
next time he's watching.
Take out his phone and record it.
Sorry.
Right.
We know what it is. He's watching, he's using his phone to watch TV, so he's going to stop his TV program, but I'll remind him next time he sees one because it's usually in the middle of the night, and it's right across the street. We can see it when it's, like, I haven't seen it, only he's seen the black one, and I was outside when I saw the silver one, and I was talking on the phone. I was so shocked I didn't even think to film it.
Well, I think that happens a lot.
Place. You know, I always emphasize that. It's wonderful to take you're in a safe place because you may not be afraid, and that's fine. That's good, probably, but we don't really know what they are. You know, we can speculate, we can associate, but I always tell people it's good to give anything of a size, you know, of a large size that's a predator-looking animal the respect that you'd give it any known animal because it's just an unknown, and I wouldn't want anybody.
You don't want to be the first human dogman victim.
If it
if
it wanted to hurt me, it literally would have taken 1 or 2 bounds to get to me. But it did stop and look at me, and then it turned and just kept slowly walking down the road. And I was watching it, and like I said, nobody else could see it on the video camera who I was talking to. And the minute it passed the second telephone post, maybe about another 12 feet walking down the road, it disappeared. It was so weird.
And the fact that they couldn't see it on the video, it maybe be a clue that this thing is something that can't be perceived with video or camera.
Right. That's also
well, they could hear it.
They could hear it, but they couldn't see it.
They could hear it, and I couldn't hear it. And then for my son to hear it in the bedroom, my oldest son, he didn't even know what I was doing outside. He just said, "What the heck was going on out there?" All I could hear was this growling.
Wow.
Yeah, it was interesting.
A lot of fascinating aspects with this, Laura Lee, and I just thank you so much for sharing it with me and with the listeners here too. And please, if you can go to lindagodfrey.com and
I will for sure.
It says About. Just scroll down and you'll see a box where you can type in, whatever message.
All right. Well,
but I would love.
Go ahead. Sorry. We'll definitely.
Really great.
Oh, sorry. I've interrupted you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No problem.
I was just going to say it's a really great story. You surprised me, Laura Lee, because she's lived in this haunted house. She's one of my very first callers into the show when we first started doing this 4 years ago, and she's had all these incredible experiences, and I had no idea you're going to be calling in tonight with a big wolf story like this. So that's incredible.
And again, just like the last call, she had no idea there were other people that have seen these same exact things.
Exactly.
And that's what's so. If it were just one person in the history of the world, everybody would just say, "Well, that's a fluke. That'll never happen." But when you've got all these people who unknowingly, that there are, not knowing that there are other people who do the same thing, report exactly what they've reported, you have to really look at it and say, "What's going on here?"
Wow. Well, have a great night, Laura Lee. Thanks
I'm
for
not the only
incredible
one.
story.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll keep listening. Thanks again, Linda, and I will contact you.
Fantastic.
Take care.
You.
One of the things that brings to mind, because like I said, Laura Lee's called in. She's had these incredible experiences in her home, extremely haunted. Are you familiar with the Bell Witch story? from the.
I have heard of it.
Well,
I don't claim to be an expert on it or anything, but yeah.
What I remember how that story started for the family on the Bellwitch farm is the father, Bell, I don't remember his first name or anything like that. I'm not an expert on the story either, but what I remember is that him and his son were out hunting, and they ran across. It all started when they ran across a beast in the fields, and then that's when all the paranormal activity for them started, is after they saw this beast.
Right. Again, that's a very traditional sort of thing, and it shows up in all kinds of places. You've probably heard of Skinwalker Ranch out in the basin. Yeah, it's pretty famous now, where these ranchers, the ranch family, encountered all sorts of strange things, but their experiences started with a large wolf-like creature wandering into the farmyard and trying to take a calf out of the pen. And I can think of so many others where it starts with this beast-like thing. The one I was mentioning to you about the woman in Eau Claire who had seen this big, giant shadow wolf began having poltergeist-like experiences in their house. The water taps would all turn on, and weird things like that were happening. And it started with, they actually, there were two sisters that lived together. One saw a Bigfoot, one saw this big shadow wolf.
One saw a Bigfoot?
Right, one saw what I call the cinnamon-colored Bigfoot. She took us to the place, my husband and I, because I do really get out in the field whenever I'm able to, either just for general recon in places that I know that have been active or where there's been a recent thing. And so my husband and I ran up there, and that's probably a 4 or 5 hour hike from where we live, but they showed us both of these places, and you could just see the one spot was a perfect place for a Bigfoot to come out from some rocks and get a drink of water or, do what it needed to do. It was under a bridge. And the other one where the shadow wolf was seen was the fenced edge of what looked like a larger tract of woods, very much like the state forest that I mentioned near us, where there have been 3 sightings of these shadow wolf things. And I did write about shadow wolves in Monsters Among Us. There's more there, and how they seem related to the very ancient UK sightings of phantom,
like Black Shuck.
Types. Yeah, the Black Shuck, the large dogs, large black cats, and all the usual animals that are around. But there's a black phantom version of them.
And like I said, these, like with the Bell Witch story, I always remember that started with the sighting of a beast, and then there's other encounters like this. You wonder if it's like, because I think back to, again, ancient lore. I've always been fascinated with Egyptian mythology and like Anubis, the jackal-headed god who guarded the gates to the underworld. You got Cerberus, a 3-headed dog that guarded the gates to the underworld. Like, these scenes are the forerunners to some kind of dimension or portal opening, is my, I guess, speculation on
it. They do, definitely. And I've actually had people compare, in trying to describe what they saw, they will compare it to Anubis. And in fact, one of the most interesting of those was at the Great Lakes Naval Training Center just north of Chicago on Lake Michigan, where there were several of the guard personnel that were out walking the grounds at night. And there's a large cemetery there. It's a military installation. It's near a huge freshwater body of Lake Michigan is right there. Mm-hmm. So it's got all the attractions. But they saw this very tall Anubis-like creature with jet black, shiny fur, pointy ears on top of its head, just like the jackal head, walking on its hind legs around that campus late at night. And were terrified, all 3 of them.
What one of the things I wonder too, and I didn't even get to in a description of it. When it walks on its hind legs, what are its forelegs doing? I mean, like, are they? I mean, because I picture a dog when you get a dog to stand up, like get your dog stand up, get a treat, like it puts its little paws up, like or it puts flat. But what are its forearms doing? What are they? Are they different than the back legs, or I mean?
Great question, because there are a couple of different answers. Usually people will say, well, it held its arms like a dog begging. I'll hear that a lot.
That's what I wondered.
Or they'll say it held its forearms like a T-Rex. You can imagine the T-Rex They have the giant rear legs, and then those little teeny claws, and they do hold it sort of like a canine. But then there are sometimes people will notice, especially the ones that are seen near native reserve lands that are thought sometimes to be skinwalkers, which would be magically transformed or projected. I believe they're more projected than transformed. Creatures, because they are usually described as being larger, more full-bodied, and the bodies are more humanoid than canine. They have actual shoulders, which, if you think about it, dogs and even bears do not have shoulders, because their forelimbs are meant for walking on. And if you see a dog or a cat or a bear sitting, you won't have those shoulders jutting out to the side like if you were looking at a human. They'll be straight down. And so that's one big differentiation, is the body. And sometimes they'll be walking on their flat feet rather than on their toe pads. And they seem to have more. And now, I do have to say, even the gray road ones were said to have claws that more resembled hands. It was like they had longer fingers. You could still see the claws on the ends of the paws, but they reminded the people of hands, and because often they were seen carrying something in their forelimbs. Another good example of this is one of the best sightings ever of all time, in many ways, I think, is the one of Stephen Kruger, who was gathering dead deer for the state. He was contracted by the state to gather dead deer kind of northwest of Milwaukee in this sort of wild place called Holy Hill, where there's a beautiful twin-spired Catholic shrine up on a hill, and it's lit at night. And then there are all these spiraling little streets coming off of it with weird names, like Hogsback Road. Yeah. And there's a river valley, and it's just kind of wild territory. It's supposed to have a goat man and all kinds of crazy lore about it. There have been strange deaths by it. So he's stopping to pick up this deer that wasn't on his list, and he had to fill out a form. So he's very near the entrance of this Holy Hill shrine, and he's got the truck lights on all over. The headlights are on, his cabin lights on, the back truck lights on. So he's got a very good view, because it's normally like pitch black out there. And he's writing up this form, and all of a sudden something pushes on his truck, like this very, very heavy pressure, and it rocked the truck full of dead deer, which meant it had to be pretty strong. And this guy is like 6'2". He's a very robust outdoorsman, knows all the animals. Nothing scares him. Well, he said he looked in the rearview mirror. He has quite a large rearview mirror on his truck, and he sees this thing that looks like a wolf. It has the head of a wolf, but it has a much sturdier body, and it was reaching with one of its limbs, and the paw looked more hand-like. It had claws, and it was reaching toward the smallish deer that he had just thrown onto the back of the truck.
Ooh.
And he realized it was too different. It couldn't be a wolf. He said it wasn't a bear. It was definitely not Bigfoot, and he didn't know what it was, and he just floored it without thinking. And whatever it was had a good enough hold on the deer that it pulled it right off the truck.
Oh, wow.
As he sped away, and also pulled off an aluminum ramp that he used when the deer were too big for him to just kind of throw them up on the truck. And he said his heart was racing. He just went till he finally came to an intersection and stopped and breathed for a while, and then his need for that ramp overcame his fear. And he thought, well, I'm just going to drive back past there. It can't get me if I'm in the truck. So he turned around, went back. The deer and the ramp were both gone.
Wow.
They were just, and now the creature's not going to take the ramp.
Right.
So it's kind of weird, but a human wouldn't take a dead carcass deer from a trunk of or a truckload of stinking other carcass deer. I mean, anybody knows what that probably smelled like. It wasn't. So he reported it. He went and reported it, and as soon as he said it was standing on its hind legs behind his truck and was fur covered, they wrote down Yeti, and it got reported as a Bigfoot, which angered him.
No way, yeah.
No, it absolutely wasn't. And, and he was really upset about that. But I thought it was but he just felt that it was some unknown, not the creature being brave, but him being brave. He is brave enough to go back and say it was an unknown creature. He felt other people needed to be notified to be saved from it. And
right.
So,
I mean, he's going to reach for a dead deer, or is he going to reach for a person?
Exactly. So that was just a really, really interesting sighting. It had many things that I could learn from just, studying all the details. And I'm still in touch with him. I heard from him just the other day. It was quite well published at the time in different newspapers. And
I think I've heard of it before. It sounded really familiar as you're telling it. I've heard of this one.
Yeah, The Beast of Holy Hill. It was on several different national TV shows. He won't go on them or be interviewed anymore. He said, I've told it enough. Everybody knows it, and I don't want to talk anymore. But he's still a good, friendly guy. And there's just so much about it that is unusual in these sightings, and a totally believable person. I was going to say something else, too, and now it's... Well, you think of it, let me know. But no, I know. I was going to mention that I did get out there in the field like the next day, and as soon as I heard about it and met him and set up an interview, and then I did a nighttime stakeout with a local tracker who had actually tracked the creature's prints, and they were like huge wolf prints. They weren't like black Bigfoot bear, but he had tracked the prints into a nearby swamp. And so he and an armed deer hunter and I spent the night in one of their pickup trucks just watching. And, of course, they never come when you're sitting there watching.
Of course not.
But at least we did that. So
was this the same guy that was on the Travel Channel, Lee?
No. Lee's much more recent. No,
that's more recent?
Yeah.
We're going to go to commercial break here in a second, but I do want to get into that too because I thought it was really interesting the links this man went to try to prove what he saw.
Yeah, definitely. I worked with him on those things for about the past 4 years. But they didn't show it on TV. I was a little disgusted because they showed the office, and like I'm the office lady that writes these things down, when actually I'm the one that.
You get out there. You go to see the location, and
I've had rubber boots up to my knees and still sloshing through his field to try imitating where we thought a Bigfoot was crouching, and ended up sloshing a mile back with totally sloshy, wet boots. So I've been in some, and we've had some amazing things happen out there too. But that's neither here nor there. Please go to your commercial.
Yeah, let's go to commercial break because I'd like to get into that a little bit. Some of the stuff I saw in there, the pictures he took, and with the deer carcasses he left out trying to bait this thing. It's really interesting. So we'll come to that, and we're still taking phone calls. Somebody keeps trying to call in. I don't know if we're losing their call, but you can try after this commercial break. We're still taking phone calls. Phone lines are open 219-230-4444. Skype ID OOJBland00. Call in. Tell us about it. We had 2 really great experiences. If you've had experience, please call in and share it. It's been awesome 2 phone calls so far on it. And even if you just have a question, call in. All right, guys, we'll be back after this short commercial break.
Don't be alarmed. It's only a laser sword fight. Don't be scared. It's only the Death Star destroying another world. Relax. It's only a movie, and it's all for fun. Director George Lucas and 20th Century Fox present Star Wars. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
At Lombank, we're with you every step of the way.
We sell your dreams.
We're not a soulless, monolithic institution.
We are, but we use nostalgic imagery.
It's walking into your dream home.
You can't really afford it, we'll lend you the money anyway.
It's kids graduating from college.
With pointless degrees riddled with debt.
It's happy picnics on the beach.
There's sewage in the water.
Family portraits with everyone dressed the same.
You look like twats.
Canoeing in the lake.
By the power station.
Catching fireflies in a jar.
And watching them die.
Cheering at high school football games.
The kids are giving each other brain damage.
These are the things our lives are made of.
Interest rates only 33.4%.
Long Bank. We're the American bank that truly, more or less, cares.
About profits.
Of the second kind, physical evidence of a UFO. Close encounters of the third kind, contact. From Steven Spielberg, the director of Jaws, comes one of the most ambitious and unusual films ever made. And what you will see has never been seen before. It's a cosmic mystery crossing what many scientists believe will be the next threshold of human experience. It is called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It begins in an Indiana town and leads to one inescapable conclusion. We are not alone. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Certificate A. Now showing at the Odeon, Leicester Square.
The Science of Crime is back for another season.
The cigarette was hotboxed. He was nervous about something. His orthopedic surgeon records indicate
that he was a deaf woman who plays guitar. Mermaids, multiple wives, threesomes. This is serious.
They're not detectives or scientists, but they act like they are. They're crime scene cops that take matters into their own hands. These guys are so smart, they never have to look anything up.
he was neurotic, with a love of puppies and experimental cooking.
I knew it. It's a partial lesion caused by light to medium tearing of the thoraxal cortex. Obviously, you can tell at a glance by the fingerprint on the mustard bottle. Andrews, my acting sucks ass.
The Science of Crime. It's forensically boring.
From deep space, the seed is planted. Terror grows.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Certificate X. Now showing London Pavilion, Classic Oxford Street.
Seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time. Like tears in rain. Time to die.
Tonight on Paranormal Soup, we've been talking to author Linda Godfrey. We've been talking about Dogman, which I've been 4 years now, almost now, doing this show. I've been wanting to do a really good Dogman show, and this time's gone by so fast because I'm having so much fun because I really enjoy this topic. I've had a fascination with the Black Shuck, Hellhounds, Dogmen, these beasts that come from, in my opinion, I really think they're from another dimension. That's just my opinion. I'm no expert, but I feel like there's something supernatural involved in this beyond just some cryptid creature that we haven't discovered. I mean, think about the two excellent phone calls we got tonight of these beasts that Laura Lee saw, Tyler saw. You know, those weren't your typical Dogman sightings, but they definitely had a supernatural feeling to them. There's something beyond our perception, another world that exists. I feel we're just inches from, and these creatures interact with us. And that's just why this subject fascinates me so much. I didn't expect to get the 2 great phone calls that I did tonight like that, so thank you to the callers. And you can still call in. We have a half an hour left of the show, 219-230-4444, or you can call in at Skype ID 00JBland00. Call in, tell us about your experience, or ask a question. But let's go ahead and get back to our guest. You still there with us, Linda?
I'm here, definitely.
Now, when I watched that, just recently watched that Travel Channel, I thought, I know I'd seen the episode, I think this year, and I was like, I want to rewatch it because I remember you being in it. And this retired teacher on his property had witnessed the Dogman, and then he kind of devoted himself to trying to prove his existence, it seemed like. But what I found really interesting was the trail cam photos. Him trying to get this thing he would put deer carcasses out, and when he took these photos, he got this like weird gray mist in these photos.
Right. Yeah. About 5 years ago, he called me and said he had bought this acreage to raise hay because he and his wife had horses in Illinois, and he needed to grow his own hay to be economical about it. And he started finding mutilated animals in his field, on the edge of the field. There was a raccoon that looked like it had been sort of unzipped with, from its neck to its lower part with almost like surgical precision, and the insides taken out and laid next to it.
Ooh.
There was a badger, and he started talking to his neighbors, and they said, "Oh, you got the place with the werewolf. You have the farm where it lives." And he had never heard anything about it.
Wow.
And they said, "Well," so they said, "Well, you should call Linda Godfrey," and he called me, and I met him and went out to his farm and everything, and was really impressed because he had already started taking the trail cam photos, and eventually he kept adding to them, but he wouldn't usually just put one, he'd put several, and had pretty much the same experience almost anyone who's tried using trail cams to capture unknown animals, is that something would always happen. There'd be visual static on the lens, or would be all turned black or turned white. Or, as you mentioned with the mist, he had one that was about, it was one of the first ones that he did, and he was actually, lest anybody think he was breaking laws or anything, he had learned how to do this legally. He would find the roadkill deer in Illinois, put them in his own truck, and drive them to his own property in Wisconsin. So it was a legal deal. Mm-hmm. And when I went to see him, he had found this 60-pound deer and put it back by the tree line on the edge of his field, quite a distance from the barn, and then put the trail cams on. And it was really interesting because he had a daytime tripping of the camera lens, and it took a solid half hour, I think it took. And when you first see the photos in a row, the first one, you can definitely tell the legs of the deer are sticking out. You can see where it's kind of nestled in this grass at the tree line. And then in the next picture, there's this sort of oozy column of light gray translucent mist where you cannot see the deer in there anymore. And there's picture after picture after picture. They go on for half an hour, and then all of a sudden it's all clear again, and the deer is gone.
That's what I thought so was amazing about that.
Yeah, it was. And so he had someone else with him that day when the discovery was made, and they figured out that just judging by various things, whatever took that deer somehow either threw the deer over a barbed wire fence and picked it up again, or climbed over the barbed wire fence to get into the adjoining field. And they tracked it through the adjoining field and got all the way to the edge, and then came to the asphalt road, and they couldn't see where it went from that point. But the thing is, it had to whatever it was, it had to have been carrying this 60-pound deer because there were no drag marks.
So it had to have it over its shoulder or something.
What animal does that?
Right.
Cougars will actually straddle something, even if it's heavier than they are, and they'll kind of scrunch it by the neck like a cat would carry a kitten, and then they'll just sort of walk, just kind of standing over, they'll drag it, and then they're walking and using all their four limbs and just dragging it with their mouth. So, but it didn't look like that at all. There were no drag marks. So something carried the 60-pound deer, and I was out there fairly soon after that, and saw where it all was. He had different types of footprints that were showing up. I also saw many of these and helped him record them. Some looked like, he called them fist prints, like when you fist bump somebody, it looked like a deep fist going into the earth. Other ones looked like large, fairly large wolf-sized prints or different-sized canine ones. I think he had one that really resembled a bear at one time. I saw that. But other times, really weird things would happen, like the carcass, and he went through, quite a few of them, and many of them were quite large. We had one that was 180 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And that one was probably the weirdest, because we were trying to figure out a way that he could track these things, and he's a very intelligent man. He's a retired math teacher, not just any old teacher.
Right.
And he actually had this idea of getting a used iPhone and then using the mutual GPS.
That's not a bad idea.
No, it's brilliant. It was brilliant. And we spent an entire afternoon standing on his wagon where he had the steer carcass, and it was not a freshly killed one. It was disgusting. So I've had to develop a very strong stomach since working out there with these kind of things. But again, it's field work is what you do. But we spent the afternoon trying to figure out where we could stick this iPhone into the carcass easily and securely, and finally decided there was no way to do either. So he had this extremely strong nylon cord that's used for industrial purposes, and he attached it strongly to the deer's neck with this nylon cord and put it out there. Well, when he went out the next day, the cord was just completely, it was as if somebody had cut it right off.
Really?
And this is way by the tree line in his field, which is surrounded by other fields, not by houses, but by other fields. So, it was in the total darkness. At night, it's completely dark out there. And not only that, the iPhone was still there, so it was not a human trying to steal the phone.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Did somebody try to just get a free iPhone?
No, the iPhone was lying there.
Wow.
And carcass, and as I said, this was kind of a rotten one, was out in the middle of the field, what was left of it. And you could see just about everything had been devoured and chewed up, but you could see it had left the neck and the head and the top of the shoulder. And this was the scary part, because it had been like twisted off.
Oh, wow.
And there was just twisted and kind of broken off. Now, what does that? Very few things would be in the Wisconsin wild would be able to do that. He took it to a butcher, and I really admire Lee. He's got a very investigatory spirit. He took this to the butcher and said, "What would have been needed to break this this way, to break this bone?" And the butcher looked at it and said, "Well, you would have had to have two things: a butcher knife and a really strong block of wood or something to break it on." Well, if you've got somebody running around your fields in the dead of night
with a butcher
knife and chopping boards, you've got a lot worse problems than animals, But there was no way. It looked like somebody had just carried it out to the middle of the field and just dropped it there. Maybe worked on it for a while.
Well, an animal wouldn't care if it had the iPhone attached to it or not. An animal wouldn't care about the phone. It wouldn't bother with the cord. It would just take it cord and all, you would think.
Right, and this was just like cut off, like casually cut off somehow. But it would not have been. You would have had a pretty good knife. You would have needed to get that off with a knife, because, like I said, it wasn't just like your grocery store twist ties. This was a very strong industrial cord. It was meant to really hold up. So things like that happen. Another time, another colleague and Lee and I, I'm sorry, this time of night I start messing up my words.
It's all right. Totally understandable.
I'm not a great night owl. But anyway, he had a 180-pound carcass out there that nothing was bothering much, and it was just kind of getting moldier, but nothing was eating it, not even the carrion birds. And I said, well, why don't we try just observing it at night? Maybe there's something bigger coming that's scaring everything else away. I said that just kind of jokingly. And stay on the other side of the field where we won't scare anything away. So we did. We parked. We waited till dark, and then the three of us parked out in my colleague Sanjay's car. He was the driver, and sat there, and we were watching airplane lights going kind of above the usual tree line where Lee usually dropped things, until one of those lights stopped, and I said, guys, that's not an airplane. Airplanes don't just stop in midair and then back up, which this one was doing.
Oh, wow.
And when I said that, and I think this is important, we all gave it our mutual attention. It turned and started across the field toward us in a straight line above, I'd say, 25 to 30 feet above the ground.
Oh,
and
that's
a steady...
pretty low.
Yeah, and we were all like, what? What is that? You know, it's coming.
Yeah.
Like, we couldn't believe that something in the air was coming toward us. And as it came closer, I mean, it was so evident it was no airplane. It stopped about 25 feet from the car, about 25 feet up, and it was about the size of a basketball, we all guessed, and it was like a lit sphere, lit from within itself.
Wow. See, it's like the ghost lights people see.
Exactly. It was really close. And the three of us saw it at the same time. We all saw the exact thing, and we were just like kind of going crazy. I was trying to get my camera up in position because I was sitting in the back seat, and those guys were blocking my view. And then just as I was about to snap the picture, Sanjay grabbed a big torch flashlight that we had in the front seat where he was sitting as he was the driver, and he shined it out the window up at this thing, which had just been hovering.
Wow.
And we all felt that it was surprised that it was hit with his flashlight. It could have done anything. We had no idea what this thing was, but it was just an instinct that Sanjay had, and it immediately began to sort of shiver. We were groping for words, trying to explain what it did. It was like it sort of shivered, and then the light just went out, but not fast, like a regular
like
light
a
bulb.
dimming, like a dim.
Kind of like a, but it was even different than that. It's really hard to explain if you didn't see it. So we didn't know if it disappeared or went around behind. There was a hedge of bushes nearby. Maybe it went behind there, or what happened to it. And so I wasn't getting out of that car, not knowing what that was, and Lee wasn't getting out. But Sanjay Singhal is his last name. Thought he just really wanted to know. So he got out, went around behind those bushes. In about 2 seconds, he came back looking dreadful and said, "I'm terribly sick. We have to leave right now." And he had not been sick.
Right.
He didn't see anything over there anyway, but he just felt completely ill. And so we left because obviously he was driving, and that was the end of it. But here we had, by that time, I mean, I was pretty good at observing these night things. And I should mention that Lee probably had like 10,000 photos, I'm really not exaggerating, of really anomalous light features on his acreage by that time. So it wasn't like the first light phenomenon that happened. And you can read quite a bit about that in Monsters Among Us. I have a whole chapter devoted. We also think that his trail cam did record what looked like a Bigfoot to us.
Really? See, all these things I say are connected in some way. We do have another phone call I want to get to before we run out of time. 239 area code. Who do we got?
Hi, it's Seraphine.
Hey, Seraphine. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, Seraphine.
Hey, I had a quick question for y'all, if you have a second.
Yeah.
I noticed getting a lot of reports out here in Florida, and my people that talk to me from the north do a lot of investigations, and they're talking about that they're seeing these large dire wolves or dogmen, but their bodies are, for some reason, in a lot of cases, are changing or getting larger, and they're showing up in groups or some of them have even been sighted during the day. Do you have any theories about that?
Now, you said they're changing, or they're changing in size, or
Yeah.
I'm sorry, exactly you put that while people are looking at them, or is it just the pack is sort of evolving to be larger? I'm not sure what you mean.
Like they're evolving and getting larger and more, I don't know, I'd say
Like the
stronger.
wolf species just getting bigger or something.
Oh, okay. And they're canines, not felines?
No, they're
Because
not
I do
felines. They're full on. Every picture I've been shown, and every account is of a dog creature, or a dog-like man, or a wolf-type man, but not quite like, I don't know, you'd see in a Hammer film.
So are they bipedal? Are they walking on their hind legs, and they seem somewhat humanoid?
Yes.
Or
And some of them have
okay.
been caught in groups. That's the thing that freaks me out a little bit. Like, why are they grouping up?
More than one, you mean? Like there's multiple of them?
Yes, like 3 to 4 at a time.
That's bad
And
enough
they
to
don't
find
look
one.
like Bigfoot?
Nope. They full on look like dogmen.
Well, it just could be. Now, I've had this theory for a long time because, like I said earlier, I like to map things out. And I noticed that probably the greatest congregation of them was around the Great Lakes, and that there are spurs that kind of stretch out. One goes over kind of down by Oklahoma. One comes down past Texas and Georgia and down into Florida. The other goes on eastward and on up to New York State and the New England towns. But that tells me that they move and they change territories, and maybe they're running into other nearly related species that they're mating with. And the thing that happens when you try to mate, or you're not trying to mate, but the animals are, when you mate species that are somewhat close but yet somewhat removed, you get oftentimes enlarged heads, enlarged bodies. For instance, there's a place that I visit in Wisconsin now, and it's a exotic animal shelter, and they had a liger, a lion/tiger.
Yeah.
And this was twice as big, maybe.
They're huge.
Yeah, they're huge. The head is really large, and perhaps they even do. Now, this liger didn't do it, but I can imagine a scenario where, because their bone structure doesn't come out quite the same way as it would if they were purebred animals, that they even then find themselves going bipedal for some reason. Maybe they're, and I'm just kind of guessing, but I've been seeing hybrids lately for some other studies, and I've noticed they have thicker necks, bigger heads. They're much larger than the parent animals, and they do seem to have some strange postural habit, and maybe that would explain the bipedalness. Other than that, I really don't have a way to explain them.
Yeah, that's what all the books and everything else is searching for the answer. Well, thank you, Seraphine, for calling in.
Definitely.
Thank you for having me. Good night, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, you have a good
I
night.
hope that helped a little bit.
She mentioned groups of them. I remember there was well, I don't remember what show it was. I think it's been featured on a couple shows. It was I wish I remember the details. It was a family or whatever had these multiple like werewolf-like creatures on their property that scared the living daylights out of them. A lot of these stories are about seeing one dogman, but are there stories of seeing more than one?
Well, I think you may be talking about an incident that happened in Kentucky.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Yeah, I think that's the one my friend Bart Nunnally writes about, Nunnelly. I think I have that spelled right. And I recommend his books. He's got Mysterious Kentucky, which would have an account of that. I believe that's the right one. I have his books. They're all very well written and have lots of amazing things in them. He also has a really great book called The Inhumanoids, editions 1 and 2. And 2 is greatly expanded and has lots more in it. So either one of those, I would recommend for a full recounting of that. And I think just about any species, it's not common to find records of attacks on people from these. But any wild animals can change their modus operandi or their way of operating at any time. According to they have brains that, if they're natural animals, like we do, that allow us to make independent decisions. They may learn different lessons from being in a new habitat or be forced to change their old ways. And you just don't know. You can't count on an animal to always behave exactly like the textbooks say they are going to, or even that other observers say they're going to. So, not having been able to personally investigate this one, I don't usually talk about it too much, but I do highly recommend that you read any of Barton Nunnally's books about all of these things.
Well, it was a really creepy encounter from what I saw. Like, it sounded like they had literally a pack of werewolves at their doorstep. But
It's exactly what it sounded like. Yeah.
But you talk about their habits. You don't know what these things might do, and giving them respect. And we had Jason Offit on just recently. We're talking about Bigfoot a lot on that episode. But with climate change and encroaching humans on territory, if these things are a real cryptid creature, have food sources they need, climate change and humans encroaching on them could force them more out in the open and more sightings.
Well, and we've seen hybridization already from those problems. The coyotes mixing with eastern wolves,
right?
And some species are making coyote-like creatures that are probably 3 times as big as an ordinary coyote. Is usually weighs in at about 36 pounds at the most. And they're getting coyotes with these long wolf-like legs and much bigger sizes and heavier weights that operate in kind of scary pack ways. So, and they startle people. It's hard to tell exactly what they are. And so when you're getting lots of hybridization, you get these larger animals that may act very unpredictably. Another, like the Florida Panther Project, they had very dwindling populations of the very scrawny mountain lions that were in Florida, and they brought in what they called the Arnold Schwarzenegger brand of mountain lions from Texas and bred the two, and it was pretty successful. I think, that the population has been doing pretty well. I'm making a film on that with my youngest son, by the way, not to sound too commercial, but we're doing it mostly to show these things and for other reasons. But it is something that, if it can be observed in natural animals and verified by science, it can happen in animals that maybe we aren't, in ways that we haven't even noticed yet.
Well, didn't they prove that, or I don't know if it's proven or not, that even bears and polar bears might have been interbreeding?
Yeah, they call it the Pizzly bear.
Yeah.
Polar grizzly. And they're very interesting, too. Yeah, and that's an actual established hybrid now.
It is. Yeah, see, and that's because of climate change and, the world changing as it is.
Exactly.
That they end up interbreeding. So who knows? It could be, we've gone back and forth tonight, about it being an actual physical creature to interdimensional, but it is a possibility that these... Go ahead.
I just said, or the sliding scale.
Right.
From one to...
A physical creature, but like you said, something that exists kind of outside our realm a little bit, maybe. Right. All these possibilities, you wonder. The one thing I see is there's a lot of videos and photos out there claim to show Bigfoot, and I mean, have you seen the HD version of the Pattinson Gimlin film of Bigfoot?
Yeah. That's my gold standard.
Right. I'm saying there's been a lot of that kind of evidence, but we don't have that kind of evidence when it comes to Dogman, as far as I know. I don't know. Have you seen any good video or photo evidence of Dogman that you believe could possibly be legit?
I have not seen any that I could say this is definite proof.
Right.
And people will send me things, and it's hard usually to decipher, or there was one that was making the rounds that you could see was a poorly taxidermied coyote.
That I know. That's what I said. That one was. I remember we had that on the World Wide Web of Weird. That was like, it looked like somebody stuck a stuffed something out in the road.
The top fur was a completely different color than the bottom fur, and you could see little metal braces sticking out, and you could tell it wasn't very big. And it was supposed to be on Bray Road, but they showed a sign that there is no sign like that on Bray Road. So I mean, it's just sort of.
I saw one video. We had on the World Wide Web of Weird, and I need to go back and find it. Of somebody running up on a dog-like creature, but it was big, and it was like just madly digging into the ground. I don't remember that one. I want to find that one now. It came to my mind tonight. It's like, we had something like that. But yeah, otherwise, I've not really seen any, really great photo or video evidence of these creatures. And, the accounts, like that one lady's, when she went to pull out her phone, this seems like, I'll kill you, is the feeling she got. It's like, these things don't want to be photographed. They don't want to be seen. So I mean, it makes it really wonder if we'll ever be able to prove anything of their existence without that.
Yeah, it's hard telling. Maybe we'll develop new technology, or people wearing,
body cams.
The cams that you can wear on your head, the GoPros.
GoPros, yeah.
I have a dash cam that I like to use just in case. Those at least are, not subject to human mistakes as long as you have the vehicle pointed in the right direction and you somehow get the camera to go off. There's some hope in those cases. And maybe drones, maybe they'll be more and more specialized. And, who knows what is going to be invented. The thermal cams, although they don't usually seem to do too much except light up nearby deer, the ones I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, Laura Lee, like she said, she tried to show the wolf on her camera on her phone. I know how difficult that can be sometimes trying to show somebody, yeah. But that the person couldn't see it. It's a possibility if these things are some kind of interdimensional thing that they're not going to show up on camera. Like him getting the gray mist. Maybe if Lee had been physically standing there, he would see a dogman there. But
yeah,
the camera won't.
It's very possible, because there was one where it took a picture, and Lee was you could see the mist slightly, but you could. I'm getting mixed up trying to say how this went. The mist was there, but we still it wasn't working. How can I say this? It was messed up. I'll just say that. That's the easiest way to put it. So there was something hinky there that wasn't happening the same way that it happened the first time. But I've had other places where the person has the trail cam out. The woman I mentioned who saw the 6-foot gray-furred one coming through her backyard, I had been there, did an investigation, found footprints, and advised that she put up a trail cam on her deck, and she got 2 pictures of smoky, translucent columns of mist.
Just like
right
him.
Where, and it measured exactly where a human male standing about 6 foot tall, standing at that spot in her deck. It matched it exactly.
Wow.
So I've had other the mist. I've got a whole chapter again in the last book, Creatures Among Us. It's called Play Misty for Me, and it's about all these different forms of mist and green air and golden atmospheres and things like that.
I see. I think there's something to that. Well, we're out of time, Linda. Thank you so much. This has been such a great show. It went by so fast. Next week, you said your new book comes out. I Know What I Saw.
Right. The 16th is the actual day when it will be available. You can pre-order by just typing in "I Know What I Saw," Linda Godfrey pre-order. It'll probably take you to the publisher's page where they have where you can click and then go and pre-order it if you can't wait that long. But otherwise, it'll be in stores. And again, if you go to lindagodfrey.com, on the About page, I have a calendar that you can see different places where I'll be signing books.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Linda. I'd love to have you back on the show again to talk more about other supernatural creatures, too, because you have, I've been reading your American Monsters book. There's so many different creatures, so much more we could talk about. But that's it. Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next Sunday, same bat time, same bat channel, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Central, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific time. Our guest next week will be Bishop James Long. We're going to get in, I'm sure, the demonic and all the dark creatures and all that when we get him on. It'll be his first time on the show. But join us then. Don't forget to check us out on Patreon. $2 membership there. If you get on Patreon, we have one exclusive podcast up on there, but as soon as I get my studio moved back to my house, we're going to have more exclusive content on there. And also, thanks to everybody who watched tonight. We will see you next week. Have a great night.